Today's video is brought to you by Prize Picks, America's #1 sports app. And when you use my code right now, HMA, they'll put $50 in your account when you put a $5 lineup down. Hard to beat that. They've got baseball, basketball, heck, they've even got the seasonal picks up here for the NFL season. Terms and conditions do apply. Please do remember to gamble responsibly. Hello and welcome to the Hawks Nest live stream show. My name is Brandon Kane, and I do appreciate you. You know I do. You are very nice for coming in here. Thank you for coming and watching and tuning on in today. I hope everybody out there is having a great spring here. I know it's heating up in the Pacific Northwest, and that's always the best time of the year as far as getting out and about. Holiday weekend we just got through as well. And today we're going through looking at some of those items here in the off-season point where you don't have as much really news percolating, though we did have a little bit of some news here. There's a couple of little items, I guess, that have come up here. There was a trade today, Irv Charles being moved from the New York Jets to the Seattle Seahawks for a 2028 seventh round conditional pick. It does that kind of draft capital doesn't get more, breezy and insignificant than that. You're going to wait a year for the very last round for a pick that's also then conditional, which should speak to this for what it really is. Because on the surface, you go, wait, we're trading a pick for a special teamer? What? Hold on. Again, conditional has got to remain on the roster. This is all about beefing up, building up, and making the best special teams unit even better if you can do so. That's what you're trying to do. So much of what you do as a team when you look at your positional groups is you say, okay, well, we're set. Don't need to do anything more there. After all, we're a Super Bowl champion. After all, we're a Super Bowl champion with the best special teams unit in the entire NFL. So why? Why do something else? And the reason being is that you're trying to make it even better. You don't just sit on your laurels. You continue to push the envelope, or as they like to say, chase edges. And that's what you're doing here. So have you drafted guys? Yeah. But those guys you drafted aren't necessarily guaranteed locks in the roster. Those guys that have been here for a couple of years aren't locks in the roster. You want no man when it comes to this special teams unit being just sort of given his spot on the special teams. You're going to be here and you're going to earn it. You're going to be out there and you're going to play like a demon like the rest of this unit all the way around, and how you attack getting down there and how you're going to block. You need to bring the goods in that way. I don't care what you're bringing on the other side, or if you are bringing whatever you're bringing on the other side is either a grade A defender or a grade A offensive player, then it's sparkling. It's fantastic. It's difference making, because what you're here to do right now is to continue to reinforce this group, because it's a difference making group. It was so last year, to as big an effect as probably perhaps any special teams unit I can remember in Seahawks history. And that's saying something, because even back to the 80s, there's a very rich history of us having great special teams all the way around. And that's what you do here, is you just keep building and building and building. We'll see if this guy is going to be able to be good to go. He was dealing with injuries last year, a little bit of an older player. But my Jets source that I reached out to today and asked him a little bit about him, he said, look, he was absolutely a fantastic gunner. A very much a difference-making kind of gunner on special teams when he was healthy. And it's just now that they've got a guy that they brought in there that they like a little bit in Arian Smith for what he can do, certainly similarly in equivalency, but then also for what Arian Smith brings as far as at the wide receiver position for them, as far as maybe some upside there that they're not going to get from Irv in regards to him playing on either other side of the ball. He'd be in there specifically just for what he brings as a special teams guy, but if healthy, he's just that good. Sounds like the Devin Witherspoon negotiations are still ongoing. Some people are getting a little bit worried about that. I don't think that there's any reason to be concerned here. As Brady Henderson talked about yesterday on the radio, it does seem like it just feels sort of inevitable that the deal will get done at some point or another here. So nothing to get too concerned about, I think, on this end of it in regards to that. But today, aside from that little bit of news bouncing around here, we have got some discussion. We've got to give out some flowers. We got to give us much more than just an attaboy. I got to present my case. I got to push it out to you guys. I got to hopefully sell you guys on what I've given a lot of thought about over this last year, watching the development of the Seattle Seahawks team and the remarkable way that they came forward, and thinking about John Schneider and what, he's done and what he's accomplished, and, where his standing is at in the league right now, and how I think we don't give enough credit to John, especially for recently, how many things he's gotten right. And that's one where it's, you give the guy the kind of the empty platitude of, executive of the year. Oh, yeah, he's had a really good run. But today we're going to unpack more singularly here this recent heater that he's been on, which is probably just about as good as any general manager in recent memory as far as this last couple of years. But it's also a little bit of a celebration today about what John's done here as a general manager throughout his time. And what stands out here is that when you start with the story of John, before we get to a little bit of the recent stuff here, you start with what he walked into here when he came in as a general manager. Because him and Coach Carroll were not walking into something where they had a cupboard that had just, you just gone to Costco and you got all of it all filled up in there, and they're walking in there like, man, look at all this talent here. Wow, how'd the last guys even get fired? That was not the case, quite the opposite. The cupboards were bare. There was dust in there, a couple spiders crawling around. It was not a good scene. Hawks had to go through and do a lot of resetting of the roster. They had to establish guys in there that could be more fitted to a championship-minded kind of approach. And that was going to take a couple of years with Coach Carroll and Schneider coming in. This was not going to be any easy fix. We see this in a lot of other places, like the Raiders right now, what they're at. Nobody would expect with them in the next 2 years to really be a good team. They've just got too far to go. They've got too many things that they've got to get fixed and go forward. I'd offer, I think the Cardinals are in the same place, but that seems to be an interesting debate that's out there right now that I was getting into on the roundtable here recently. Looking at our guy, John, though, and what he has done here since, specifically, I wanted to kind of look at 2012 when you really took off and finally had the roster in place and you were able to, fully feel like, okay, we've got our guys. They had to go for like 1,300 players of churn through like a 3-year period. I mean, you were just bringing on and releasing. And it spoke to really how thin really the roster was. And we can backpack why that was. It was, Ruskell and some of his approach did not lead to great results as far as talent building and the foundation that was there. Part of it was too, you were coming to the end of the era and that was going to happen as well. But as you can see here, 145, 82 and 1 since 2012 is John. Of course, 2 Super Bowls, a 638 regular season winning percentage from this football team, 12 and 8 postseason record. Pretty good when you got a positive postseason record from that long of a period of time, especially when we're talking about 20 postseason games at that. So a remarkable run as far as percentage and, just keeping a consistent winner. You can see you got no 4-win seasons, no 5-win seasons in there during this time. No matter where the team's been at as far as us having some issues or kind of picking at some of the things that were problematic, you still kept the head above water at all times. And especially, again, over this last couple of years and really building this team up to the way that they built him towards last year. And you can see how he did it. And it wasn't just that, again, rolled some dice and he came up with the right combination. It's because he made it happen. But 638 is the winning percentage. And I thought would be interesting in looking at this, as you look at the record here and what he's done and accomplished, is to kind of look at a couple of other peers within his group on this and what they've been able to do here too. Because, we've got first, Les Snead is a guy that somebody would maybe bring up to me. That's a guy that is in the running with John on this. Interestingly enough, he's been there since 2012 as Snead. Now, he obviously had to come in and do some of his own fixing there, and it was a rough run there for him to begin. Boy, it's it's nice to have that kind of job security where you come in at 7 and 8, 7 and 9, 6 and 10, 7 and 8, 4 and 12, and all of those successive seasons. Yet you're still keeping your job, still keeping the job. Let me hire the next guy. I'm gonna bring the next head coach in. Speaks to hey, they knew what they had there in Snead because it was eventually going to come around. All that being said, you can see 119, 96 and 1 regular season record at 553. So just cross-referencing that back to John, 638 to 553, significantly better winning percentage there as far as regular season goes since that time period of 2012. John, of course, significantly better postseason record, 7-7 postseason record here for Snead and the boys, and 2 Super Bowl championships, of course, equivalent there. And you got 4 NFC championship appearances, which is definitely of note on that side of it. So Snead, not bad. He's had a good little run of it himself. And then the other guy that, of course, will be tossed out, I'm sure, a good deal here is going to be our man, Howie Roseman. And how about Howie? Howie's done stuff too. And Howie's got 2 different separate runs here, where it's 2010 to 2014-ish, I believe it was, that he was the GM there with Eagles initially. And then it was 2016 to 2025. So that is a 138, 85, and 1 winning percentage of 618. Come back, 638's got 618 beat. So yes, I know he's got a couple of Super Bowl wins like us, but a better regular season winning record, though in High Roseman, you do have a guy who's got a little bit more on the postseason record as far as that goes at 20-11. So we can have some fun debates, I think, when it comes to the Eagles. 6 conference championships would also have Seattle beat on that measure of it, as Seattle on this one had, of course, 4 conference championships. But I think a little bit of a thing that we got to consider with Howie and some of the success that he's had here, especially in keeping this thing, where it's at over the last couple of years, is the fact that Roseman has also buried more void money than any other team in the NFL by a substantial margin down the line on the books. And I do give him credit for being one of the best general managers in the sport. I think that, he's done a really good job of not just copying people, but taking his own unique approach to the way that he's going to have this team built on both sides of the ball. And I think that stuff's earned. I think as though when we come down to trying to, it's always tough to do parse between the best of the best. You do find yourself, from my standpoint of this, going, well, John's used a little bit of the void money. Roseman's doing it like a kid who's, silver spoon kid that's got the golden credit card that never is going to run out. And the bill is going to come due, and it's already coming due now. It's not pushing the A.J. Brown trade, but, they're already well aware of the fact that they've got to start kind of figuring out what's what with some of this bonus money, because they're running into some pretty treacherous territory as far as their cap situations go into the future, where you look at it and you just go, yikes, man, how much void money? And just to kind of give a representation of this, because I think it is worth noting when you're making this evaluation of, like, if I give you all this extra money every year for you to build your roster, are you that brilliant at roster building, or are you good at roster building, but you're kind of being able to sort of get a little bit more than you probably should, because of that? And I would argue with him that maybe there's just a little bit of that going on here. So let's take a look here. Just want to kind of show you guys this here. So here's the Eagles situation 2026. Let's go out into 2029, 2 years down the road. See all that? Void, 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 void. You go, okay, Brandon, it's, it's 2 years down the line. It's 3 years technically down the line in 2029. But I mean, they're in the middle of a Super Bowl run, brother. What do you expect them to be doing here, bro? All right, how about 2030? Void, 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 void. Another void, another void, another void, another void, another void, another void, another void. You guys seeing the trend here? How about 2031, Brandon? Certainly they don't got any money out there, right? Certainly 5 years into the future, they don't have anything stacked out there, certainly, right? Okay, 2031. Jalen Hurts, $20 million of void money. Brown, A.J. Brown, the same one they're going to trade right now, $15.4 million of dead money. Lane Johnson, $3 million of dead money. Jordan Mailata, $7.8, almost $8 million of dead money. Devontae Smith, $8 million of dead void money. Landon Dickerson, 7.6. Saquon Barkley, 6.1. Zach Bond, 3. Jonathan Grenard, 13.3. Cam Jurgens, 9. This is not small marks. Jordan Davis, 13 million. Folks, this is 2031. You want me to give this guy credit for being the best general manager in the sport? This guy? The guy that's better than our guy? Let's take a look over at Seattle, shall we? Let's see what they've done quantitatively. Because like I said, it's not that John hasn't used void money. But let's take a look at 2029. Okay, we got 2. How about 2031? Well, you got Cross. And then you got Jackson still on the books there. So just Cross 31 with $1.6 million. It's one thing to say, okay, I'm going to need a little bit of help with maybe some of the future void year. This is the new price of doing business. You want to be a champion. You got to push everything in. You can't be conservative. All that stuff I can get and understand, where you got to use a little bit of it. But there's a difference of that and maxing out 4 credit cards along the pathway. Every store you're walking into, they're cutting another one in half. Sorry, you're maxed out, sir. And he's maxing the F out of those future books in a major way, which, okay, is going to soup up his roster right now. But as I said, I don't think that necessarily makes him just so uberly brilliant in his approach right now. And I think this is also shows up in a couple of other ways. Their strange approach to the offensive side of the ball and what he's got going on with Sirianni there. Just kind of the weird vibes with the Jalen Hurts situation, where it almost seemed like this offseason, some of what was going on was Howie trying to publicly kind of air out some of the issues with Hurts, because they want to start to get on down the road on that one. They can't contractually do it at this moment. The owner kind of loves him, doesn't want to do that. But Howie's sitting there going, I got to give out a guy like A.J. Brown at this point, having to kind of dish out players to kind of keep everything kumbaya as far as the locker room goes with Hurts and company. And maybe we can get down the line of moving that in the other way. Again, I don't think these are great moves as far as you being awesome as a GM at that point, having to get to that stage of things and driving that in that direction. So I still think Roseman's a good GM, but I think John's got him beat because he just wouldn't let this type of stuff get to that type of place of things. I think he'd get ahead of it rather than be reactionary to it, which is a little bit of what I think the Eagles are doing right now with their situation all the way around. All that being said, I've gathered up here about 28 items or so, which I'm going to pounce through with you guys today. And these are to make my case more firmer to you guys. And to say, okay, like here are the exact items that John went through. And I did these in order. And I want you to really notice here, it's going to be both what you did and what you kind of didn't do a little bit on this, because it's very important on this. And I'll kind of show why on this, a couple of these on the avoidance factor of this. But the fact that these weren't you just getting this decision right and that decision right, and then everything kind of was good from there. You could just kind of sit back, put your hands behind your head, and then let Mother Nature take over. Let gravity take its course. That was not going to be the case. You had to take every one of these moves I'm going to list to you guys. You had to do every single one of these right and get every one of these right to become a Super Bowl champion. And that's why he's the best general manager in the sport. That's why John Schneider is going to be a Hall of Famer. So we're going to go through each of these. Bear with me on this. Definitely was fun to go through this. Is kind of an exercise going back and trying to think through this and timeline all of this stuff up a little bit. But just take in what your general manager has done, and this is since just 2022. We all know what he did through the Legion of Boom era. We all know what it did to take. I'm talking about just this last 3 years, and it starts with the Russell Wilson trade. Probably the best trade definitely the best trade in Seattle Seahawks history. I think a top 3, top 4 all-time trade at that, right up there with the Cowboys trade and how it'll be discussed. After all, because it was, you moved Russell and then how Broncos had to also sign him to a contract extension. Can't forget that part. Again, it's part of what you avoid. And that it's not just the move of Russell and to get back the assets you got back. It's also the moving of Russell and then not paying that money, not being under that contractual obligation. The Seattle Seahawks gave up a 4th-round pick in Russell in return, got Drew Lock, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, Charles Cross, Boye Mafe, Tyreek Smith, Devin Witherspoon, and Derek Hall. Witherspoon has been, a 4-time Pro Bowler at this point. Awesome player. Derek Hall seems to be starting to come into his own. Mafe was a key piece in that 4-stack rotation on the Super Bowl roster, and Charles Cross looks every bit now on a second contract. The pillar left tackle, blind side that everybody's out there kind of looking for. He's not going to be Orlando Pace or Walter Jones, but there's a few of those guys walking the earth. Maybe there's none of those guys really walking the earth right now with this current generation. He's just solid, steady, all around, really good, gets the job done, earned that contract. And that trade was part of what started to give you the rocket fuel. Now get yourself to that moon. Get yourself out there, Levi Stadium, or as I like to call it, Hawks House. Of course, Drew Lock still does remain on the roster as a backup quarterback here, but there still could be even more returns as we get into the future on these guys as they start to really come into their own now from a physical prime standpoint. That offseason, you were also able to find Uchenna Nwosu in a free agency on a 2-year contract, $12 million contract, I think it was. So nice kind of sort of a day 3 guy that you found that, again, became a fairly key contributor as part of that Super Bowl rotation off the edge with the 4 guys. You kind of needed all 4 given times of this year. And he did have that really nice 6-7 game run in there where you really needed him to come on as he did. Really feels like maybe now having an offseason, this team has a lot of confidence in him coming back now this year and being able to really recoup his prior form a little bit more closely to that, as he was still even into last year kind of getting over the top of those injuries and the dirty hit from J.C. Teller from a couple of years ago. Another move that then happened that, of course, off season was the Seahawks. Move my big head out of the way. As the Seattle Seahawks had what I would call a historic draft class. Charles Cross, Boye Mafe, Kenneth Walker, Abraham Lucas, Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen. That is your first 6 picks right out the gate. And you have, of course, Cross, as I said, the pillar left tackle. Kenneth Walker just signed the richest free agent contract for a running back in NFL history, on top of being Super Bowl MVP. Mafe just got paid $20 million per year from the Cincinnati Bengals on a multi-year deal. Abraham Lucas, to me, is becoming a just better and better player here as he's gotten past his knee injury, it seems like, and he's a real top-end right tackle in this sport as well. And, of course, Tariq Woolen just got paid. Kobe Bryant got a major contract out there. An absolutely fantastic class. Hit this thing out of the park as far as the draft class goes. Not just the assets back from Russell, but also taking your native picks and really pushing them hard, pushing them forward. Next move the Seattle Seahawks did, and this is going to be a double dipper on 4 and 5 for me, is that you rolled with Geno. You rolled with Geno Smith. And everyone said, what are you doing? My God, you can't do this. This is no way you can go this way with it. Sorry, Wyatt Teller, not J.C. Teller. I think it was J.C. Treader. Mixing up names. But you rolled with Geno when no one said that you should do it. And everyone said that this is you go from Russell to Geno. That's your big plan. You got to go draft a guy. Anybody. Just draft anybody. You got to draft a guy. The amount of pressure upon John this offseason to just go get a quarterback in anybody but Geno, from the fan base to the national perspective, and the amount of tomatoes that were being thrown his way cannot be understated in regards to deciding and sticking to roll with Geno, which was the right choice for a franchise that was in transition, that had a lot that it needed to get fixed and sorted out on both sides of the ball. And Geno came in, and he was able to be a stabilizing force for this team, give you a couple of really good years at times with not the best of offensive systems in place, not the best of necessarily collective talent, or at times really young talent, as in that first year. I think you had 3 rookie starters on that offense, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, you had 2 rookie tackles. Walker was kind of a starting rookie as well. So it was a lot there. Geno wasn't necessarily set up at all times for success, but it was the right choice going with him, especially with what those alternatives we're looking at. And that brings me to number 5 here, which was avoiding the quarterback landmines of the 2022 draft class. Desmond Ridder, Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, Matt Corral. Remember Matt Corral? Guys, I remember the picture of Pete with Matt Corral and Kiffin out there, Ole Miss. Remember how everybody's like, oh, we're going to draft him for sure with the number 8, top 10 overall pick. That's the guy we're going to grab. How much everybody's just battering for one of these guys. No, I'm going Geno, not these guys. They're not going to be good enough. And I know Malik Willis just signed his contract with Miami. We'll see. He's on his 3rd team. We'll see. I'm not selling him out, but I still don't think that would have been the good pick, especially understanding in Malik, he was going to take this amount of time to develop. Even if he does become something at this point, it was going to take you 5 years to get there. I don't think I want to do that for a guy that I got to take in the first round. So smart by John. Very smart, avoiding those landmines of the 22 class, rolling with Geno on the other side. You bring back Jaron Reed. He comes back and proves that he's still got plenty of gas left in the tank to be a rotational tackle on this. You're not building this defense up, and you haven't been building this defense up necessarily by just how good can we make the top end frontline starters? Where can we take those guys to? You've said, look, we want good top line starters, but the depth needs to be reinforced here as well. And you bring back Jaron Reed. He comes in to not only give you some really good play on the field, but you can't underrate as well him being part of that collective leadership within this locker room, which was the big helping hand to take the 3rd youngest roster in the NFL to the Super Bowl last year. You don't get there unless you got a strong inner core collection of vets. You may not have as many vets as other teams because you're so young, but the core of vets that you do have are able to lead the youngsters to the promised land. And that's part of what Jaron Reed was able to do on this team coming aboard. Another guy that was part of that core, you also signed Julian Love that offseason to a 2-year, $12 million deal. You recognized in Julian Love, like you recognized in Uchenna Nwosu, I'm got a market opportunity out here in free agency. This guy's best days are ahead of him, not behind him. And John was right on those decisions, right on that outlook of those situations. So, 2-year, $12 million deal signed to Julian Love. Bam, bam, bam. You got Jaron Reed in. You got a couple of your leaders in here starting to get the defense back to turned around. You also at that point had Jamal Adams coming back with Quandre Diggs on the injury, so you were trying to get a little bit of reinforcement for that. You also made Jason Myers the highest paid kicker in the sport, guy that went out there and made 5 field goals for you in the Super Bowl and might have laid the biggest hit of the game too, by the way, at the end of that game, is looking very smart in retrospect, huh? We had the Dr. and Jekyll Hyde seasons throughout his career. John overlooked that and said, look, I think this will stabilize down here. And he was been really good for us. Just set an NFL record last year for most points in an NFL season. He is a very big part of this special teams unit being elite and driving that being him and Michael Dixon being the driving force of that in a major, major way. But that's also one where a lot of general managers might have shrunk for making a kicker one of the highest paid kickers. Like, we'll go cheaper. How many other general managers would have said, I'm going to go cheaper here so I can put that money elsewhere? John does have a very interesting decision, though, after this year because Jason will be up off that contract and he's going to be a little older, but we know kickers can play till they're 57 and he's going to be due for another, probably big deal potentially. And what's John going to do at that point, especially if we're talking about being like $8 million a year? Next up, we also have in the next draft class forward here as we get into 2023, 2 Hall of Famers, 1 draft class. I merely ask. We know Devin Witherspoon's been stacking up the Pro Bowls. We know what Jackson Smith has as far as upside. What's best case as far as what can Jackson give us on the best season here as far as his, well, there you go. 2,000 yards receiving just about. Unstoppable force just about. And in these 2 guys, you have guys that we might look back in retrospect to say, okay, you got the 2022 draft class, so those guys that was historic, but in this draft class, you might have pulled 2 Hall of Famers out of the first round. And I don't know if that's been done in NFL history. I'm just saying. Keep it in motoring and boating. We got avoiding Anthony Richardson trade up in that draft. I don't think that you had a chance to really go up and get CJ Stroud. I don't think Bryce Young, there was any really opportunity, with some of these guys that were up there at the top to go get. I do think Anthony Richardson could have been in play if you were willing to throw the kind of capital at it that the Colts wanted at that time. Because Colts, wanted to draft him, but I think you could have sold them if you were willing to really throw a lot at him, and John didn't. And another place where you got to give him, like the avoiding the Ritters and the Malik Willis's on those other prior drafts, it's partly the quarterbacks you avoid. Because you get yourself hitched up to a guy like Richardson, and now you're in on this roller coaster ride for a couple of years. You've put the investment in, so now you got to wait to see if it'll play out. And that's problematic now if you end up passing on other quarterbacks who could have been better through that time because of your commitment level to the guy that you had to draft and roll with to see what you got. But I thought that was also a very, very big part of this is avoiding itself just Anthony Richardson. You got the trading of a 2nd and 5th round pick for Leonard Williams. In retrospect, this looks like a no-brainer at the time. A lot of heat was thrown on John's back. How can you put a 2nd and 5th rounder for a player who's at his age? How can you do so for a guy that's going to be coming up contractually and you're going to have to turn around and pay him this big market deal, and then you're going to feel like you have to pay him the market deal because you traded these assets for him? Everybody goes, it doesn't seem worthwhile. Team doesn't seem, it seems like you're making the go forward move and the team doesn't necessarily feel quite ready. But he came in here and we saw John, who's been smartly, one of the little theory things that I think that he utilizes, as I like to call it, is preying on the weak. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes he'll look to those teams that are lesser, who've been bad for a long period of time, who have players that have been kind of beaten down in those environments a little bit, but who still may be very competitive and may still very much want to go out there and win. And he'll say, hey, I'll bring you in here. We'll put you in the best environment ever. We're not going to shrink away from paying you either. We're going to give you an opportunity for championship success. Do you think that can get another gear to your game? Do you think that can motivate you to just a little bit of an extra level? It doesn't take it up like 15 notches, but we've seen the best version I'd offer of Leonard Williams at any point in time of his career. I think this is the best version. I think you can make an argument last year. He's one of the top 2-3 best defensive tackles, if not the best defensive tackle in the sport. He's good and all around great, and just been a linchpin on that defensive line since he's arrived mid-season, and a hell of a trade for John in retrospect. Sadly, you also had a little bit of this, and I know that some of you are going to say, well, this is more of the front office or more of the committee here, more of the ownership here. I'm not going to deny that this was a decision that came from ownership as far as the decision to move Carroll out of the role of head coaching role. I also do think, though, that we'd be silly if we didn't acknowledge the fact that John was a part of that process from a couple of different angles. I think certainly from a consulting angle, I don't think that he was necessarily driving the bus on this one, but I certainly think that things were brought to him in a certain way that, without getting too much into the weeds on this one, that John wasn't necessarily anti going in this direction. And we know that John was already looking at coaches, including Mike Macdonald, that year, as Carroll had indicated at the start of the year, that he was looking to possibly retire after the season, and then kind of changed his mind. And so I'm not saying he wholly made this one happen, but he also rolled with the punches on the situation. And I would be probably very surprised if not in the background was, kind of nodding his head with ownership's decision on this move and thinking that we've got a potential to do something else and do bigger things here by moving on at this point. And so I am going to give him some credit for it. I do think it's a part of the puzzle here, at least in a small fashion. Of course, then it brought us after a very exhaustive head coaching search. And this is one where we go again. It wasn't just that he sort of picked out Mike and he said, I'm going to take that guy. Certainly targeted on Mike. And as I said, that he was even scouting him that prior year, throughout the season as a possible head coach replacement for Carroll if he was going to retire. But what we saw with Schneider also was a very exhaustive process, going to the likes of guys like Patrick Graham and Mike Kafka as head coaching possibilities, and going through multiple interviews with guys. They didn't just try to just happen to land on a guy. And I say this because this is what organizations do. They go out there and they target it on a guy and they say, I want that one. And then all their smart people around him go, owner, we gotta be exhaustive. We gotta look at a lot of possibilities here to make sure we land right one. I know, but I just feel like he's just got alpha energy or something, man. He just feels like that kind of right guy. That's how I sort of feel about this one. And I think with John, you see him pushing back against that. They did it both with this and the offensive coordinator search we saw with Kubiak last year and this year as well, that they see a value in doing it this way. But then you landed what we might come to find is the best head coaching prospect of the last since Sean McVay. And maybe even has a chance to supersede that. You never even know on that side too. So remarkable hire of finding Mike Macdonald. He didn't find a guy that was just necessarily a Coach Carroll, acolyte. That was on the table there with a Dan Quinn. There was good possibilities out there that would have been celebrated out there. There was a Mike Vrabel out there that they interviewed. There's a Harbaugh out there. But, you went with a choice that wasn't necessarily purely the obvious one. I know a lot of you guys wanted him out there and were very much in favor of him, but it wasn't necessarily purely just, yeah, that's the no-brainer one we're going to go with here. You then, of course, re-signed Leonard Williams to over a $20 million contract that next off season, which was notable. You also did so with Julian Love, two very smart contracts. So not only bring them in as you did, but then extended them and didn't extend them cheaply on this. It's not that you came in and signed them. It's like these guys cost a little bit of money, but money well spent. Julian Love last year was a top 6 rated safety by PFF. I know he had a little bit of injuries, but when he was out there, he was your best safety, and he has been your best safety the last couple of years. And as I said, I think that Leonard Williams is the most, if not the most, one of the most dominant defensive tackles in this sport, or best all-around defensive tackles in this sport, however you want to qualitatively put it. You then had the draft of the next upcoming year where you landed the best defensive player in the 2024 draft at pick number 16. How did you do that? You just did, John, you just did 2 Hall of Famers like last year, bruh. What are you on, man? What are you on? But because of the quarterback insatiability of the teams of 2024, because of the offensive obsession at the time, The Seattle Seahawks, because the Indianapolis Colts were hyper-concentrating on an edge pass rusher, the Seattle Seahawks were able to land the best defensive player in the sport. And while he really bloomed last year and he had a really solid rookie year, you still have not yet seen the best football that Byron Murphy is going to have to play until he eventually rests fully, or at least more fully, into that 3-tech role. He'll always probably be a guy that gets a chance to bounce between either, but he's living in a nose tackle role. He's gathering up that pressure and sack production, double teamed more often than not. And double teamed by his alignment, double teamed by where they place him on that defensive line and what they set him up for. He accomplishes what he's accomplished here, really set up in a lot of ways in that positioning to be, as any other defensive player in the sport on that field. You could make the argument that the nose tackle is as set up for failure as anybody else because the positioning sets me up to be double teamed naturally. I'm literally going to go often between the two shoulders of the center and the guards, just right there for them to come and I got to hold my ground. He's been phenomenal and his best days are still ahead of him. And he's already been really great and he had a great Super Bowl. But Byron Murphy at pick 16, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? John had just a phenomenal land on that one. You also, in regards to the landmines, 2024, were able to once again avoid the quarterback landmines as you did a couple of years prior. Yeah, Drake May, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, very good quarterbacks. Guess what? You weren't going to be able to trade up for those guys. Those teams weren't going to pop off of them. They loved those quarterbacks. They wanted those quarterbacks. They were sitting and picking. McCarthy, Penix, Nix. Could you have traded up for one of these guys for where you stood in this draft? Could you have offered the capital on one? You could have. It was right there possibly if you're willing to overload them with an offer, if you were really sold on them as QBs, but you avoid them. And in retrospect, the avoidance of, let's just start with Penix and Nix, or Penix and McCarthy certainly is undoubtedly smart. Somebody might push back a little bit on the Bo Nix thing, but my man's had like 10 ankle surgeries now that we know about that we didn't know about with him coming out at the time. He was already an older prospect in addition to that. And while he's played fine, I don't think he's set the world on fire. He hasn't looked like a difference maker like Drake May and Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels have looked like at times, if not putting together good stacks of games looking like that. So again, smart in the decisions you avoid. And you go for a Michael Penix, you go for a J.J. McCarthy, you're not bringing in a Sam Darnold. That doesn't happen. So smartly enough there to transition in the way that they did in that area of things. We had the trading for Ernest Jones for peanuts mid-season. You get him from the Titans. Under the radar move. You had a couple linebackers you had brought in that prior year to kind of replace what you had in Jordan Brooks and Bobby Wagner to be better fits for Mike Macdonald's defense. They were not good fits for Mike Macdonald's defense. So you went and found him his dog. Ernest Jones, another leader on this defense. Julian Love, Leonard Williams, Ernest Jones, all about ball guys, leaders in the locker room, guiding forces of young men. You brought this in as you started to assemble this thing. Look at these decisions. Right decision, right decision, right decision. Get to that offseason. Get a 3rd round pick for Geno Smith. And the Geno Smith DK Metcalf thing, which both happened at this time. 2nd round pick for DK Metcalf. These occur not because, let's not look at these historically and do revisionism here. Both of these players, prior to them announcing that they wanted to trade, had Seattle subtly dangling those players out there on the open trade market prior. And in Geno's people's case, they're on record as saying that Seattle's offer was not good enough, and you knew what Seattle was going to want to be. Seattle knew what he was going to want to be paid. You know, they came in with the offer because we'll put the value here. That's where it's at. But then some teams have a quarterback that's not a fit for them anymore, and they just, you got to move on from him. Just have to kind of give him away. Just got to let him go. Got to release him. You find 3rd round value for him in Geno Smith, a guy, like I said a couple of years ago, who everybody was telling you, there's no way you can let this guy start for you. There's no way that this can happen. And how far the narrative had twisted, right? To where now it was people saying at the time, there's no way you can let Geno Smith go. And it would be wild to watch people bang on the guy for then trading him for the 3rd round pick was who's the same guy who was kind of the only guy on the island saying, I think we should rock with him a couple of years ago. Carroll was with him too, obviously, but it's kind of hilarious that people then sort of, same people that are probably bitching him about them riding with Geno the prior couple of years and then come back around to suddenly being like, there's no way you could trade him. And then, of course, the DK Metcalf one, which was a harder pill to swallow. You 2nd round pick. You would have loved to have gotten a 1st round pick for him. But this may be for guys like him where they're at. We're going to find out with A.J. Brown here, I think, in a couple days, potentially even, as far as his situation, that, this is maybe the cost when you got a receiver that's a little bit older and, not necessarily a spring chicken anymore. It's one thing when you're 25. It's another thing when you're up around that 30 years of age, especially when you're talking about with DK getting the 5-year contract at $30 million like he was able to get. But you got a 2nd round pick back in return. You got value back rather than just losing a guy for nothing. Yep, a little bit of dead money on both accounts that you had to hit to do it, but you got some draft capital back, which just helped you to continue to build up this roster and keep this roster built up for the future. Get into that offseason, you re-signed Ernest Jones to a value-based contract extension. Boy, his extension looks good in retrospect. I think there's some reasons that it's there in the way that it is that it's a good contract. I think there's also some, let's just call it MRI issues with his knee. If we were to look at it under the old microscope, that also kind of impacts some of the stuff from a risk factor from Seattle standpoint here. But extending Ernest Jones on the contract was a phenomenal move, super smart in retrospect, and has paid incredible dividends as he is just the linchpin there in that defense. You can't block him. Exceptional tackler, great in the open field as a tackler, just on it instinctually, and underrated as a coverage guy as we saw last year. Just because of those instincts and those smarts and awareness in his zone drops, gets him in the right place at the right time and allows him to make a play. We keep it rolling here. Last year, landing Lawrence, Kupp, Darnold in one off season. None of these moves were looked at as home runs when you made them. 2 of these moves at least were looked at as highly controversial. In Lawrence's case, it was like, what are you expecting to get at his age? Yeah, he's been a good player one time, but at his age, for a guy that's been beat up as much as he's been beat up, you're not going to get anything out of that contract. That's a 1-year deal at best. Yet we're seeing in both Kupp and Lawrence's case, we were told these were only going to be 1-year contracts. These guys are shot. They got a fork sticking out of their back. They're going to be done. And yet they're going to be playing under these contracts for a 2nd year because they actually brought that kind of value to the table. Sam Darnold, likewise, was able to finally conquer his ghosts, beat his demons, slay his dragons, become a Super Bowl winner. But all of these contracts, as you can see them now in retrospect, were great deals. And as you see with a lot of these players that we added, Leonard Williams and Julian Love and Ernest Jones and DeMarcus Lawrence and Cooper Kupp, Sam Darnold, all of these guys, you're never going to question their leadership. You're never going to question how much they're all about ball. And I think it shows when you can put a roster together of this many guys that it just starts to breathe in and out as a team almost, in the feeling of them a little bit. When you have it just that thoroughly through your roster, 1 through 120 now, I guess, is like what they would like to say to us. You also extended Michael Dixon, making him one of the highest paid, if not, I think it was the highest paid punter in the sport at that time. This is part of just like the move today that we're seeing with Irv, is that you've built this special teams unit on purpose. It's cost a lot of money to do so, but it's been done on purpose. Not because you just kind of stumbled your way in the dark and landed on it, but because you've gone through every turn to say, how can we keep making this better and better and better? And Dixon, phenomenal punter, like Jason Myers, had a great Super Bowl, which was really cool to see because he's a guy that, like Myers this year, who set a literal record in the NFL for points, kind of gets forgotten about up here in the Pacific Northwest. Because I've said many times, I think that if there is ever a way that a punter could be on a Hall of Fame trajectory, I think Dixon's on it. I don't know if it's possible anymore, if they'll ever let a guy like that in, but this guy's been great from day one. And again, in the Super Bowl, he showed off his stuff again and what he can do. Flip a field, punch inside the 20, hang time. You're not returning it anywhere. He can put it right down at the sideline. He can positional kick wherever you want it. He is good in the elements. Hell, if you need him to even fake and run it, he can do that too. We get back to that last year's draft, and okay, John, you got a couple of years ago, you went with 2 All-Famers. Then the next year after that, you got the best defensive player in the draft. What have you got for me this draft, John? Certainly, you can't do me a trifecta here. Certainly, you don't got another one, do you, John? And he was like, yeah. I do. He's like DJ Khalid. He's like, and another one. And another one. 2 more future all pros in the 2025 draft. I merely ask. I just merely ask. Nicky Manwari, or as we call him around here. Demon Wari. And Gray Zabel. Two guys who had really good rookie years. Demon Wari is already Hamilton right out of the box. I haven't got the wrapping off of him yet. He's already Hamilton. Already. And a Gray Zabel, a guy that had Calais Campbell confused in a game, that mic'd up session we had last year where he's like, if this thing was another game at another time, I would have had you all day. And Gray's like, you haven't done nothing all day. You haven't done nothing today. He's like, no, but that left-handed thing that you're doing, I'm on that. He's like, yeah, but you didn't do anything against it. And he just has something about him, an aura about him that just feels like Eamon Wari's freakish, all about ball, perfect fit to this defense. Zabel just feels like the old school kind of guard that just also has some athleticism to him. The real deal, both of these two guys, and just two more thrown in additions on top of the stack of this team that just make them that much more talented, that much more better. A few years ago and back in 22, many people would ask, where are the difference makers? Where are the real guys that they're separators? Here you go. One after another here now the last couple of years, including this 2025 draft, which is a strong draft otherwise too. Torrey Hortons and Riley Mills that are going to maybe potentially come along in this draft. But these two guys, hell, just coming away with two all-pros potentially could have been just enough. And then last couple of items here. The Rashid Shaheed steal of a trade, 4th and 5th round pick, which at this point we know to be about basically 5th and 6th round pick for where we were picking in the draft. And you got in Shaheed, a guy that absolutely just shot adrenaline into the arm of your offense last year. And not only in the way of just, being a guy that could be a burner now over the top if they give you single high safety coverage and they try to lead over there to JSN and they try to leave him one-on-one. But then also as a guy that could, be a fly sweep guy. You could give him carries out of the backfield. He was great as a punt and a kick returner, as we saw multiple times. Atlanta Falcons game, you're tied. He comes out of halftime. He returns that touchdown. Game is over. The Rams game, when he makes the punt return for a touchdown there to give you a breath of life, where you went from having no chance to, hey, we actually got a chance now. Or even the 49er game, where literally the opening kickoff of that game, you could just feel, and I think even Niner fans would agree to this, that took away your hope. You were done at that point. That was all. That was the only fight they had hoped to have, is that they could maybe hang around and you're going to return the opening kick on us. You got him signed to an extension this offseason, but those trade deadline deals are just one of the places that John has been excellent throughout the years, not just in this recent heater period, but throughout the years. And the Shea trade, just another one that shows that very starkly. Finding diamonds in the rough for Super Bowl help. This is another, I think, a very underrated, but very important one when you look at this roster. And it's a new thing that I'm kind of getting caught up on a little bit. Am I thinking a little bit about building Super Bowl rosters and great teams and kind of the forgotten, hidden components of those teams that people don't think about. And I tend to think now as quarterbacks become big driving forces of people in their imagination or thought process of those teams, and then the stars, those all pros and everything. And that it isn't that you don't need those things, you do. But I think the other lesser part that you sometimes need is to be able to find that help in places that is not always the easiest to go find it. And then to find help that's not merely just sort of getting you along, well, the ship's leaky. We're bucketing out water every couple of minutes, but it's technically keeping us on the waters. Not that. I'm talking guys that I can bring in there that are actually going to then help my team out when they're out there. And what stood out last year is in Jalen Sundell. You went out there and found him, a guy that fell out of the draft because broken foot problem. People a little bit worried about some medicals. You go, we kind of like this guy's athleticism. And man, that program out there's, they know how to teach guys how to run block and get after and be physical. We like what they're doing out there too. Let's bring him in. Let's grab him. Drake Thomas, fast, dynamic linebacker, playing really good in the preseason for the Raiders. Let's bring this guy in. Hey, we got to wait on him a little bit of time to develop. He's got an injury thing, not last year, but the year prior that he's kind of fighting through. Let's let him develop it. He's super small though. Boy, fast, instinctual, just a freaking tornado out there in tiny form. And so you get Drake Thomas, Torrey Horton, 5th round last year. That before you had Shaheed in here, he provided that same kind of shot in the arm that you really needed through the receiving core. We can see that, like Kupp, JSN, and then having this kind of dynamic X type. And what that can then kind of do fully for the offense as a whole. We saw that what that brought. Tyakata last year. Tyakata might be the best representation of this. Is then Kobe Bryant. You have a guy that's rated, I think, 26th, 27th, something like that as a safety last year by PFF, which does match a little bit the eye test when you watch him on tape, where I can show you a couple missed tackles. I can show you him getting got at times here and there in coverage a little bit. Not badly so. Not that he didn't earn his money, but it's there. It's smatteringly there. And then I could make the argument to you that the Akata is a little better in that regards in certain spots. Akata rated as the 14th, I think, highest rated safety on 700. It's not just 200, 300, 400, 700 snaps last year on defense. Akata, 700 snaps. So not really sample size either. Yet he came in and outperformed your starter. And what did Tyakata cost you? What capital, what expenses, what resources did you need to give up to go get him? I can think of no greater metric of a general manager than your ability to find value when giving up nothing. Doesn't get any better than that. Anybody can be in the top 5 and pick the best blue chip player of the draft. That doesn't take a genius. But look what John found as far as value in other places to help on in this team in the way that he has. Guys that have come out and really perform well. Not just been, again, guys in there with the leaky boat, but guys that are got the sail up, got the onboard engine turned on, and you are cooking through those waters. Cooking through those waters. All right, last one we'll go to here of this heater that John's been on the last 3 years here, approximately 3.5 years or so. And that is going to be playing the compensatory game to the mother effing max. And what do I mean by that? I can bring it up here. There we go. So as we can see here this offseason for the 2027 draft, this is about what you're charted to probably get when it's all said and done. Stupid face off this here. Try to go over here. And so what you can see here is Boye Mafe. You're probably going to get a 4th round pick for the contract given out there for him. And then you're going to get 3 5th round picks for Kenneth Walker, Kobe Bryant, Reek Woolen. This is what smart organizations should do. And I thought that them going into this offseason, this was going to be at the head of the stack of what they were going to probably think about when it came to free agency and their approach, being that some guys are going to have to go. Some guys we are going to retain, but we can't just keep everybody. That's part of the lessons learned from the prior run that we had with the Legion of Boom team. We're going to need to make some tough decisions even early on in this process. We're not going to push these down the road. We're not going to Howie Roseman this crap. We're going to get this right and sort it out correctly and do this smartly. As I would say this whole past 3 years has been start to finish. Is what John is doing is, making the right move, but you can see how it's also the intelligent move on the surface of it. Even in the pushback points between the Geno Smiths and the Sam Darnold. You can see him out there looking and trying to locate, is kind of like even he did with the Russell Wilson pick, is where can I actually find value in these contracts for quarterbacks? Everybody's falling over themselves to overspend and to draft first rounders and to put all the capital and assets they can into this position. Where can I find value? That's smart. That's intelligent. As I said, anybody out there can say, I'm going to give 4 first-round picks and I'm going to get my number 2 overall quarterback. Look how smart I am. That ain't smart. It's just you throwing a bunch of stuff and wowing some team over the top, and maybe you get right on that quarterback and maybe you get it wrong. But John's gotten so much right that stands out over this past 3 years that was not ready-made easy to get right. The Russell Wilson trade was not one that everybody was just like, yeah, John, you're just so smart doing this. Many of these moves that I'm presenting to you, especially the ones from a couple of years ago, there's a good number of pushback out there for him. The Kenneth Walker pick for a running back, a good amount of pushback out there. And yet he's on the right side of it so often on this. And definitely does a little bit of going back to that whole, we used to say, in John and Pete we trust, and we're right back into that in John and Mike we trust right now. Because these guys are not getting things wrong, they're getting it right. This offseason has not been one that's been a representation of him reverting to old ways. at the Legion of Boom era or reverting to bad ways, which doesn't really have bad ways, but continuing to keep more to the form of the smart contracts with how they've set up their money. As you go into the future, this is only going to continue. Charles Cross, Abraham Lucas got them under contract smartly in advance. You didn't wait. You didn't get hold-ins, hold-outs, requests for trades. They're paid, baby. Paid. JSN, we're not messing about here. Puka Nakua's sitting there going, what are we doing, Rams? Am I getting, you getting pay me? You're done, Jackson. Done. And we got you through your whole prime too, by the way. We found the way to get this deal done so that you get the security and then we're going to get all of your prime. Every last bit of it. Devin, you're next. Get on board. He's going to knock all these contracts out. He's playing the compensatory game. You got $500,000 of dead money sitting on your books right now. That's by far the least amount of dead money in the entire National Football League. There are teams with $111 million of dead money sitting on their books right now. And there are many teams with similar amounts in similar places. $500,000 is what you're on right now. With $28 million of cap space still left to spend. It doesn't get better than this. You're watching the best in the sport at their job. Salute, John Schneider. Thank you for bringing us these championships. Thank you for being driven in a way to not just do your job and to go about the business and just, hey, I'm a general manager and I'm just going to be happy being here. I'm just happy to be here. But actually, no, I want greatness. If I'm in this, then let's actually go for this. Let's not sit around our hands. Let's do every last thing we can to be a champion, because you know what? Not every organization in the NFL is doing that. There's a lot of ball dropping going around in the NFL. A lot of it. And this organization doesn't do it at any single turn. And it's part of why I love being a fan of this team. And this organization is how they operate and run, because it's so easy to laud them at every turn because they're doing things so smartly and correctly and right. And it's probably going to bring success again here in the very near future. You guys, let me know what you think. Do you think John's already a Hall of Famer, best general manager in the sport? Love to hear from you. Please do drop your comment on in here below or down the section here if this video is posted afterwards. If you guys can for me today, please hit that like button. I know it's a small thing, but it's a big thing in helping me out majorly, as well as please get subbed on up. We're on the road here to 30,000 subscribers. That's the next big goal here for this channel, and we're cooking along well in that regard. So thank you to all of you who have joined aboard here. Very much appreciated. I want to thank, if I may, here very quickly, the sponsor of our show, which of course is Prize Picks. Actually, let me get this thing out here. Prize Picks is, yeah, there we go. Prize Picks is the #1 sports app running right now in the game. This is the best one you're going to find out there. So many different options. We got basketball playoffs. We got baseball rolling full go right now. Mariners starting to they're kind of getting it figured out little bit by bit. Is getting there. But you also got the seasonal picks out there. You can do the pick'em games as well. If you just want to I think this team's going to win over this team. I got this one. I'm feeling good about this. You just got a feeling, got that knowledge, that sports knowledge. Put that knowledge to test. Go out there, win yourself some money. And when you use my code today, HMA here on the Prize Picks Sports app, and you put down a $5 lineup, they'll put $50 in your account. $5 for $50 in your account right now. Terms and conditions do apply. Please do see their site for details, but do utilize them if you get a chance. And I do get asked a lot about the utilization in the state of Washington. And yes, in the state of Washington, there are going to be some limitations still, as they're trying to kind of figure out the finer tooth details, if you will, of what's going on there as far as taxing. It's been quasi-legalized. They're just waiting to get the things taxed. But you can use it in a casino in the state of Washington in full when you're on that network. You can see from my seasonal picks right now, I've got Jadarian Price over 725 yards rushing for the year. That's a no-brainer for me on this one. And then I'm taking Jackson Dart at less than 3,225 yards passing, as I just don't think he's going to remain on the field long enough to reach that mark. I also don't exactly entirely trust the New York Giant passing attack with Neighbors coming off that hobbled leg to be able to supply that as well. So those are my picks. Please do utilize Prize Picks today. As I said here, it's available in a lot of different states, and eventually we'll be coming in full in Washington. But like I said, too, always just pop it on into the casino there, and you're going to be good to go. But shout out to Prize Picks for sponsoring the show. John Naylor, thank you for starting us off with a nice little dono here. $5. Appreciate you for that. He says, not sure why, but damn glad the rival NFC West teams don't emphasize special teams. Damn glad. Can Walken comment? I can. John, it's like they think it doesn't exist. Like the boogeyman, the Casper, the ghost. Boo, look who's here. Seattle special teams. You should have known. You should have paid attention. It'll take them a couple of years, but I'll tell you, John Naylor, it gives them an excuse. They come at the end of the year and they say, woe is me. Officials didn't help us this year. And then we just can't figure out this sticky little special team unit thing. How are they doing it? And they go, I told Sean, you got to buy a kicker. Sean, $9 million cost. He said, no, I won't spend it. No, I want another receiver. I said, okay. Walken doesn't get it either. He doesn't get it either, John. But, to your point on this, I'm glad as well. Because this is a division that is run with, let's put the Cardinals over in the corner for a second. But when it comes to the Niners, the Rams, there's a lot of things these teams do really smartly. They know how to build really good teams. They know how to practice the right way. They know how to build tough teams. They schematically are on their P's and Q's. The front office is a little more spotty with the Niners, but it isn't a bad one per se, and certainly has the commitment from a monetary standpoint to be in. And the Rams are even a little bit better in that regards. So you're going to have teams that are this hyper competitive around you in this division. It is nice to have at least a thing that you can kind of easily point to and identify and say, well, here's where we have a noticeable advantage on these teams. We're going to be noticeably better. And that, as it showed in a variety of different games last year, makes a difference. It really does. Especially with just, as I think about it, that the way you build that team and your methodology of approach to how you win football games. There's teams that are going to go out there and try to be offensive driven, and they're going to run up the scoreboard. And then there's going to be defensive driven teams that are just trying to kind of I'd say like the Broncos almost a little bit, where it's like, we're just going to try to limit you down and we'll score just enough. And then you have these teams like we built, where it's like, we're going to try to have an offense that can be a top 10 offense, and we'll have the best defense in the unit. We'll have the best special teams in the NFL. And then how does that all work together? And what can that all consistently kind of churn out as far as productivity goes, as far as, pure raw points go, as far as our stops and what we're generating points on the other side of it, when you have those three things all kind of interworking together a little bit. But Watkins very confused by their approach. I don't get it, John. They're so smart. So very smart most of the time. Not here. No. Dumb here. A little bit low intelligence, IQ. I don't get it. No. James Morris. James Morris is coming in with a $50 donation. James, you are the man. Thank you for that big old donation drop. Very, 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 very kind of you, James. I appreciate you for that, my man. Back-to-back is a real possibility. It is a real possibility. Has it been tough to accomplish in NFL history? Yes, no doubt about that. I mean, it's hard enough just for a lot of teams to get to the Super Bowl. But I think that as you look at what's at play here, and there's a lot to sort of turn over in the possibility of back-to-back and sort of what it takes. But you've had the smart offseason. You're in the position to still make some more supplemental moves if you have to, though you don't necessarily need to. You can feel like you could stand pat with what you have a roster and let it just continue to develop. But you have built that team. And it is a team that sort of snuck that Super Bowl win already out a year early a little bit. That there, to me, is a really strong argument to be made that you could become even a little bit better this year overall as a team. Now, the NFL might be a little bit better with it too as well than what we saw from last year. Certainly going to play a little bit of a tougher schedule. But this is very much a real opportunity for them, every bit as much as it was for the Legion of Boom team coming off the Denver Bronco dominating win that they had, right? Echoes of a lot of the same stuff. They're running it back so fast with the young roster. These guys seem to be very much locked in. We didn't get James this offseason. A bunch of guys who seem to be out there like trying to make, I'm making my rap record this, or I'm going to be on my podcast, or I'm going to travel all through the world and I'm not going to be lifting a weight for 2 months or doing much anything. There's this vibe you can sometimes get from guys that'll that'll be like, I won my Super Bowl and I can kind of relax a little bit. And I haven't gotten that feeling from these players this offseason. And nobody's been in the news. Nobody's out there doing anything wrong. Everything that we hear about these guys, they're all about ball. That it's part of what's made them a little bit different as far as their mental approach to the Legion of Boom, that was a little bit more fiery, a little more chip on the shoulder, is that these guys are just, a little more of the all about business, all about ball, all about this. This is our life. This is what we're doing, and yeah, I think it's a real possibility here, James, in a major way. And it's one that I'm going to continue to bang the drum on, because you're not often be able to be in this position as a franchise to necessarily go back to back, but also to be able to go back to back with a roster that hasn't been completely pilfered because it was a Super Bowl roster, right? Or one that then loses a couple guys to retirement, as a lot of these Super Bowl roster was on, lose key guys to retirement. That you're actually able to retain pretty much almost everybody, at least most of the majority of this team, most of the starters, inject some talent into the roster on top of it. It's a very exciting time to be a Seattle Seahawks fan. As a guy that's covered this team for 4 decades, it doesn't get better than this, as far as this positioning of this team to really do some great things. And if you can go back to back, cementing your legacy, cementing your all-time legacy as that type of team, it would do that for sure. It really would. But thank you, James. Thanks for the big $50 donation. You are very, very, very kind of that. And I agree with you wholeheartedly on this. I wouldn't gas you guys up falsely. I think this team is really well positioned. I know the Rams are going to do all they can, but I think the NFL's not as strong as it's been in other years. I think the NFC is pretty wide open. We were talking about on the roundtable the other night that a lot of these teams in the NFC sort of have this sort of one step forward, one step back thing going on. Eagles are going to add Mekhi Lemon, but they're going to give up A.J. Brown. And the offensive line's kind of getting older. And, okay, you had Jonathan Grenard, but you lost Jalen Phillips and no Brandon Graham there anymore. You can kind of go team by team and do this. Green Bay, it's like, all right, you're Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, out the door now. You're losing a middle linebacker, out the door now. Josh Jacobs, let's see what happens with that situation here. Detroit Lions, David Montgomery moved out the door. You have a tackle who decides to retire. This is after Frank Ragnow last year retired. So it's like your offensive line's kind of started to take some hits. It's kind of what I see across the line in the NFC a little bit. And it does embolden me with some confidence. I ain't going to lie. Warhammer Guy, thank you for the $5 donation. I really like how they've positioned themselves to go all trenches next year in what's widely believed to be a stronger draft. A long run is loading. It's an interesting place to be in from John's perspective. So many general managers are sort of chasing the life of their job, chasing that. Can I just hold on to my job? Can I stay in the building another year? And John's in a position of earning so much cachet that, he's looking at it like, how can I elongate this run? And it's an interesting position to be in from his perspective, I would think. And what the thoughts that you have to turn over, what you have to contemplate, that the different ways you have to plan things out 2 and 3 years ahead of time versus other teams and their outlook of it. Like, it's a very interesting dilemma to be in certain ways, but he has really positioned things well in this. And then this is the beautiful part about doing this a year ahead of time. I would say too, Warhammer guys, that when you do it a year ahead of time, you sort of sneak one out. It's like, wow, you already got one in the bank, and now you're just kind of starting to come to bloom now. But yeah, he's getting the offensive line set up to be a strength of this team, the defensive line to be full of just a bunch of dogs on that side of the ball, keeping the skill position players reinforced, keeping the running back position strong, keeping your tight end position deep and strong. You've got a lot here to believe that this can be something that they can sustain for a long period of time. And it's hard to navigate. The NFL is built so that if you're going to be great, there's just little things that come in that kind of pick and pull you back down to the rest. But they're well suited right now, Warhammer. I agree. Very, very well suited. Thank you for the dono. John, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, blaming officials. We call that the full Jake. Never go full Jake. Never go full Jake. We might have to make that a thing. That'd annoy the hell out of Jake. I know it would. I might use that on him, John. I'm going to steal that one. I'm definitely going to have to steal that one, bro. Never go full Jake. And we'll pop over to you guys here in the chat. Probably won't go super long today. I know I say that a lot, but maybe not super long today. But if you got any questions or comments, just put B Brando Hawks Nest HN. We'll pop around through there a little bit. Price looking good in OTAs, Fro. Very good to hear. Did we get Myles Garrett yet? Not yet, man, but it does sound like we might be getting some Garrett news this week. One way or the other. I like the Garrett rumors, laughing out loud. It's just, they're out there percolating, aren't they? We'll see. I do think that there was always something to a little bit of the fact that the bonus money got moved. I mean, that's the real key on this deal when you hear about these Garrett rumors is more than anything happening right now. It's that, I think, $26 million vested optional bonus thing that kicks in that they push to training camp. And I've got, nobody's really pushed back on this that I've said this to you guys in the chat on this, and being that there's no reason to do that from a Cleveland Brown perspective unless the intention is to move him. Because the money saying would stay same anyway. There's no like, well, we saved the money for this moment so that we could then create the money to then afford him later on. Like, it's on the books, it's on the books. So you pushing it forward that way a couple months makes no impact unless the intention is to move him to the other team so that when the vesting hits, that at that point it's hitting that team's cap and not yours. So I do think that there is going to be a move of Garrett here at some point or another. It doesn't mean necessarily to us, but I do think there is going to be a move on this sometime or another. See, like Daddy, if the Browns trade Garrett, the Vans will burn down their river. That's hard to do. It takes a lot of fire. What's the vibe about the special teams guy we got today? I asked, I'm friends with Richie over there in New York, and he covers the New York team. So I asked him a little bit about it. He said he is definitely a great special teams gunner at the forefront. Injured last year. They got a little bit of a younger replacement who can also do things on the offensive side of the ball that they like a little bit more. So that's kind of why they're looking and being open and moving on from him. Kind of a flyer thing, though. It's 2028 7th round pick, so conditional at that. He's got to make the roster, too. So he'll be part of the competition. Real nice shirt, Brando. Thank you, man. I got to find the good stuff here. Oh, I'm dirty here. What did Jacobs do? What didn't Jacobs do? That's more of the question at this point. Brian Hawksnest, I'm a bit cold on having Torrey Horton returning kicks, punts this year. Who do you think comes out as the top returner? I mean, Rashid Shaheed looked like at the end of the year the best punt and kick returner in the sport, at least in this special teams unit. You know, I don't think that if you have as lethal combination of that was last year, I don't think that you twist away from that. And the thing to consider to me with Rashid Shaheed and making $17 million per year is that, you know, he's not going to get the touches to really make that a worthwhile investment necessarily for that. It's not, you know, what he's going to be doing as a receiver to me that makes him earn that money. It's what he does as a receiver, and then what he does as a kick returner, punt returner, and then what he gives you as an occasional guy and give literal handoffs to. So I think with him, it's you're cobbling together his whole value. It comes from those 4 different designations: kick returning, punt returning, receiving, and then the handoff game. And so I do want to be able to, knowing that, look, I'm paying kind of the prime price for all of those things. It's a worthwhile price, but I am paying that price for that. And so I need to make sure that I'm getting all that. I mean, like last year, he had 9 attempts, 69 yards. I'd like to get him up to like 25 to 30 attempts for the season, you know, two attempts a game essentially, or, you know, at least 1 a game. But I think that he's really, really good as a kick and punt returner. And it seems like Harbaugh's got some little twists and adjustments he can take advantage of to utilize that to the utmost. And I don't want to shy away from that. Plus with Horton, I think I'm cool with you as well with Horton, not because Horton can't do it. It had the longest punt return in Seattle Seahawks history last year. But we gotta kind of treat Horton with a little bit of the, rubber gloves, padded walls, a little bit of maybe some styrofoam packaging, bubble wrap. We got to be careful with this guy, and probably got to manage the amount of violence that he's has to undertake because, his body has got a little bit beat up early on here in his career. See, Squawker's with me says, unless Shaheed starts catching 900+ yards receiving, then special teams is the only way for him to earn his $17 million per year. That's where I'm at with it. That's where I'm at with it now. What about the NFL's golden 12-13 rule? I'm not sure what that rule is. Warhammer Guy, what teams do you think is the biggest regression candidates this season, Brando? Ooh, great question. I think the Patriots are certainly a team that's going to regress as much as just long season, Super Bowl loser, and an insanely hard schedule. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars regressed this year from where they were by at least 3 to 4 games. I think Carolina regresses this year. As much because I think the rest of the division gets marginally more stronger, kind of all the way around through a bit. And I think that Chicago has a little bit of a regression as well. I still think Chicago's got a good chance of making the playoffs, but I think that they're probably a couple games less than what they were last year at the end of the season in the win column. Those would be the main ones I think that I would kind of tap into. Good question. Niners are going to regress. Bunch of golden oldies out there. It's possible, man. I mean, it's a team that has a lot of variance. It has the biggest variance. I think I said last year we were the team that has much variance out there as you just about find as far as, the upside of the team to where the downside could be if things didn't go right. Niners are kind of that type of team. I think there is a 13 type of win team in there if they can all stay healthy and right, but there's as easily as well a 6-win team there if, 3, 4, 5 injuries hit in the wrong direction and they're toast. No doubt about that. Yeah, I think the Bears regress a little bit. You're with me on that one. And Seahawks Daddy, the trade of the DJ Moore was a little bizarre to me too. I mean, that's where they overfilled their wide receiver room, and there's only so many balls to go around for a team that wants to remain balanced and isn't trying to throw the ball 49 times a game. And you had Odunze, Love, and then the kid that they got, why can't I remember his name? Luther Burden out there. And you had those 3 stacked, Cole Kmet in there still for when they want to go 2 tight ends. Bears do a lot of the 3 tight end stuff, but they bring out the tackle as the 3rd tight end. They do some 2, 12, 13 Seahawks stuff with the 13 personnel. But I think they just looked at it as like we've got a little bit of extra so we can chop a little bit off the top for resource-wise. But I'm not sure. I don't know. They need a DJ a lot when I've been watching them over the last few years. Seahawks Daddy, they got so little, and the Bills were kind of desperate on that situation. It did kind of feel that way. College roommate's a Steeler fan. I feel bad for him. That's the oldest roster I've ever seen. Yeah, that's a roster where you look at them and you go, what are you guys doing? And I guess they're trying to, reminds me of you're trying to get some wetness out of a towel and there's nothing left and you're just squeezing and squeezing and squeezing and trying to get that last little drop as you can. Feels like that to me. And I just think this is going to be rot for going down a pathway for the Steelers where, again, they're going to fall far short. And now they're still a year removed from even beginning the process of really resetting things. Don't know why they've done it. Don't know why that there's some teams we can see with this Warhammer are just completely unwilling to kind of call the ball. You know, you moved on from Tomlin. It's okay. Just call the ball. It's okay. New coach. Call the ball. Don't have a quarterback. Call the ball. But, you know, we see these teams just, they can't do it. Kind of surprising. I don't get it myself, but we can take advantage. At least there's that. Herbicide, do we have any interest in Josh Sweat? I would, to a degree. I mean, it is one where the cost comes into play a little bit on this. I don't think the Cardinals are going to be super interested in moving him within the division either, and that you're going to probably have to give up a little bit more than you want to give up to get it done here. But he's a really good defender, and he's a fit to this system. Can play the run really well, gives you really strong pass rush. You know, he'd fit in and be probably instantaneously on this defense. He is your best pass rusher instantaneously if you were to come to this team. But I would be surprised to see the card. You know how this goes, Herbicide. Moves in the division and teams trading within the division, especially the bottom dweller helping out the top team. You know, I think that would make them throw up in their mouth a little bit even if they were on board with making that trade. I feel like it just makes too much sense here to do a Sweat to the Eagles, and then Sweat goes to the Eagles, and the Eagles then throw back to the Cardinals, the second round pick. Then they include Nolan in it as well, their first round pick that they picked at like the 32th selection a couple of years ago. And then the Cardinals throw them back something like a fourth round pick back in return. You know, so it's kind of like a tit for tat deal. And the Cardinals can feel like they've still got kind of a young developing edge then. They kind of get a something for nothing at that point because Sweat was just a free agent. And then they're still getting a draft. They're getting a draft pick for next year's draft. That's a much stronger draft. I would think that would be a better approach for the Cardinals. But this was one that was kind of going around the round table again last night where all the other three guys in there were like, there's no way you can trade Josh Sweat. And I was kind of the one guy going, I don't know why. Like, and they're like, you're like, yeah, okay, got 12 sacks for you. What did those 12 sacks do for your team last year? What did that do? What was the bottom line in helping out your team, those 12 sacks? It's like, well, I mean, he got production. Okay, but what's it doing for your team though? And he's 29 years old. He ain't 25. So like when your team's going to be finally good when he's 32 and he's coming out of contract, are you paying him another contract then at 33? No, you're going to move on from him then. So just move on now. I continue to feel more reinforced in my theory of teams are in 4 different states more than ever with those type of talks, and that you have to identify where you are as a team. You cannot walk into the process saying, I don't know where we're at. I kind of think we're this, but we might be that. Where are you? Are you rebuilding? Are you ascending? Are you stuck in purgatory, or are you elite? And the reason you do that is because then if you can identify exactly what you are, then you can know what decisions should come from that thing. So for instance, if I'm elite, go for it trades, draft capital for the future now, pushing money down the line so I can maximize the cap today. If I'm a rebuilding team, okay, I need to accumulate draft picks. That's one of the, not just the only thing, but that's one of the main things I need to put at the forefront. And if I have a piece of valuation here on this team that's a little bit of an older player, kind of expensive, who another team sees value in that can give me back a very prime draft pick, and I'd say a day 2 pick's a pretty darn prime pick, then you got to make that team if you're that team that's isolated in that rebuild mode. The problem is that the Cardinals, I think, kind of think of themselves as sort of ascending. And what is it I always say? The reason this is so important for you to properly identify where you're at as a team really in the off season is because the main problem most teams mistake is they misidentify which pecking order they fall into. The team that's rebuilding thinks it's ascending. The team that's elite's actually the team that's in purgatory. And you break yourselves and you break your future by that misidentification. So it becomes the most important step of the process, the beginning step of the process. And I would argue the Cardinals here with the Sweat thing, this is one that's a little bit of an indicator about where they're at mentally as far as organizationally about where they think. Yeah, I get that their fans want to be positive and think that this is just a short turnaround away from finally getting right. I get that that's what they want. You got to be bigger than their fans though as an organization. You got to think smarter than that. You got to think realer than that. You can't have your head as like a pie in the sky. Let's just manifest this and hope it happens thing. No, you got to build it right. As I went through point by point, step by step with what John's done the past 3 years into making that happen. And John did this very same thing. He moved to Russell Wilson when the timing wasn't right because he didn't have a great team. He moved to Geno Smith when the timing wasn't right and he didn't have a great team. He moved DK Metcalf when the timing wasn't right and he didn't have a great team. So it's like we walk it like we talk it out here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm not telling you, I'm not advocating for advice to the Cardinals that isn't the one my own team wouldn't take. But boy, there's some of these teams that are kicking and screaming herbicide, kicking and screaming not to do the thing that's the proper right thing in the moment to do for where they stand. McFrewers. Hey, Brandon, were you surprised about how the guys in the roundtable last night were optimistic about the Cardinals? I mean, they're being held hostage by Brissett and they have one of the worst owners. I'm just why you guys are so smart. I didn't see your comment there as I went on my whole little rant there just a second ago, but you're touching upon exactly the thing I'm talking about. This is, yeah. I mean, we're of like mind. I'm glad I'm not the only one seeing it. I felt like I was taking crazy pills last night. Like, and those guys have been, all of them, quite frankly, Jesse, Jake, Mike, they've all been hyped up on the Cardinals since I've been in the roundtable since day one. All of them have thought that team is better than it actually is. And I don't know if they feel bad for Mike and they're just hoping, if they talk kindly about the Cardinals, he'll feel better about. I don't know what it is. But I do feel like I'm taking crazy pills when I'm like, are we looking at the same team? I even have Cardinal fans like, our defense is actually, your defense gave it the fourth amount of most of points last year. You're not close. What are you talking about? I was surprised, Mick. Yeah. I would have pushed in more on it, but I've heard their opinions on this already in prior years. So I'm just kind of like, okay, you guys, you just kind of think the Cardinals are going to be good, but you guys can't really quantitatively drive that into why that's going to be. Marvin Harrison hasn't been a smashing success. You're already just about close to moving on from a Darius Robinson first round pick from last year. You already moved on from the old Jolari kid in the second round you taken a couple of years ago. You got second round Max Melton, who's probably getting closer and closer to the door himself. Will Johnson, who was at injury concerns and being drafted, still has injury concerns now after his rookie first year. The kid you took in the first round, the defensive tackle, was injured multiple times last year. You don't know what you got in him. The offensive line's a complete rebuild on the fly. As you said, you got Jacoby Brissett threatening to hold out at this point. You got 15 running backs, yet you're going to be playing from behind constantly in game after game. Budda Baker is showing very much the wear and tear of years of throwing his body around like Jamal Adams through the young part of his career, and he is now diminished. I don't think they're that close. I don't think they're necessarily the worst team in the NFL, but I also don't think they're necessarily that close. You mentioned the ownership. That's just kind of one more part you can throw on top of that pile. But I am a little confused by the Cardinal outlook and the way that they get talked about. It wasn't just on the round table. I've heard other people speak about the Cardinals this way. It's like, you guys don't even know what you have in your coach yet. You just fired your coach. If you guys are so good, why'd you just fire your coach? If you're this close to the precipice, why'd you just let him go after just hiring him 2 years ago? Doesn't seem like it adds up quite. Or you're heard Titans might send third round pick and Will Levis to Cards for Josh Sweat. I love that trade for the Cards or for the Titans. Love that for the Titans. I'm sure the Cardinals are trying to get a 2. And that's where it'd be tough whether Titan, where if the Eagles supersede you, where it's like, you guys know your third round pick might be early to mid. And that second round pick that they're going to be giving is going to be like a late second round pick. So the Eagles are a little bit more willing to say, well, we'll give up the 24th pick in the second round in next year's draft. And that you guys then have to match that second round pick. I would wonder if it goes that way a little bit here or there. But I will say it gets hard with edges to quite know for sure, because sometimes you can find that creative kind of trade to get out of that second round pick and get to a third round pick by kind of moving this for that and that for this. Warhammer guy. Also, did you add Copacabana yet, Brando? I figured it'll come in handy when Jake goes on one of his tangents. I haven't yet. I've been hard at work on the next Kubiak episode. I've been just grinding on that. So I'm making good progress, but I've just been trying to hammer that out, hoping I can get that done in like the next 10 days or so, have like the whole thing finished up. So I'm grinding right now, brother, on the tape, but I will get that edited for sure because that's going to come in very handy and probably be utilized quite often this upcoming year. Mick says the Cards need to 100% trade Sweat. Get as many assets as you can. That's where I'm at with this, man. It's like stack assets when you're in the rebuild phase. You won't do this forever. The point is what you're trying to do is the theory behind this goes just like what we did. And this is where this is very cool is that I'm speaking to something that I believe for a long period of time on, and then I'm speaking to something that I just got to watch my own team play out in real time over the past 3 years. We isolated the fact we were in a rebuild. We operated with our decision-making from that. We moved assets when we knew we weren't the team that was in the right place to do that, because what's the purpose of that? You stack the assets up. And in football is as much at times a game about talent. I got more talent than you do collectively. Not difference makers, not quarterbacks. My collective talent is better than your collective talent. But what's one of the best ways I can make my talent collectively better than that team across from me? If I've got more draft picks than that team has, if I've got more prime draft picks than that team has that I'm playing against, if I have a significant amount more of draft picks for a small collection of years than that team has, it's in for 5 years, for 2-3 year period, you have more picks. Now all of those guys come into bloom at the same time. All of them come into bloom at the same time, and bam, here you got your window. That's what, to me, you're trying to build as you go through rebuild. I think a lot of teams get caught up in the conceptually, go find the magical quarterback. I think a lot of teams get conceptually bought into let's go buy our way to making it happen. My opinion, you supplement with the buying, you build the core off the draft picks, and you build the core off the draft picks from heavy accumulation for a short period of time. And that's where the Cardinals should be right now. That's, in my opinion, that's the proper way to operate. But it would be very Cardinal-like for them to just ride with Sweat through the contract, or try to think that maybe we'll get more draft capital after this season for Sweat, when now he's actually 30 and not 29. Z-Town, hey Brando, what do you think of Emmanuel Wilson? Will produce this season? He's probably like a 200 to 300 yard guy this year, Z-Town. I think he's an insurance policy for Charbonnet. In McIntosh and Holani, you don't really have hammery kind of running backs. And I don't think this Wilson's necessarily pure and simply a power back. He's got some interesting juice to him as far as an outside runner goes that typical power backs wouldn't have. But he does have that same kind of element like Charbonnet, where, these running backs now tend to come in like we have with even a Jadarian Price, where it's like you got kind of sub 200 pound players at the running back position, which back 20 years ago used to be 225 all day, every day. And when now you have a guy that's 225 in the open field, like a Wilson, or 220 like a Charbonnet, and they've got that explosive build-up speed to the moment of impact. They can run guys over and knock guys down. And Emmanuel Wilson is a long day at the office as far as a tackle goes, because he's got nothing artful about his running style, but he is going to hammer as he gets up the build-up speed. And that's where I love him on those outside zones, because you throw him outside, you can pitch play or outside zone him, and then he gets the 3 or 4 steps up to the build-up speed, and he's bringing that weight with him. And you really do feel it on contact. And that's the type of thing that can wear down that defense over a course of a game a little bit. But I think that's the counterbalance to a guy like Jadarian Price. And that is what you have a little bit in redundancy wise with Charbonnet when he's out there. And I think Charbonnet eats up more carries once he's healthy. But early on in the year, you've got to expect that they're going to be very careful with Charbonnet. And that does then probably mean that Wilson ends up getting some, more of the touches. But also, who knows here, C-Town, if the Josh Jacob things ends up proving to be a very serious situation for the Green Bay Packers, do they come back to Seattle and say, hey, we'll throw a 6th round, 6th round pick to you for Emmanuel Wilson so that we've got reinforcement at the position this year? Because it's not like the Packers are just going to be like, if Jacobs has got to be out for a while, where they're just going to be like, cool, we're just going to rock with our backups for a team that we need to have kind of be ready to hopefully push for contention this year. But about 200 to 300 yards if he does remain on the roster. Yeah, Warhammer, I agree. Niners, Cardinals, trench played and good enough. I do think the Niners are starting to do some interesting things defensive line wise, especially on the interior, but they're still going light on their offensive line. It's old ass Williams and Zuni and Pooney. Yeah, I like the Jets doing. Jets in the mode of what I'm talking about. I mean, that Jets took this exact lesson I'm speaking about last year. You got Ahmad Gardner. You got Quentin Williams. Really good players. You're not anywhere close to being good. And by the time you are good, where are those players going to really be at? They absolutely fleeced the Colts for 2 first-round picks for Gardner. Got a first-round pick back for Williams. Moved this offseason. Great trade. Tavondre Sweat was moved for, Jermaine Johnson to the Titans. Love that move for the Jets. They had a quiet, strong offseason to the Jets. Even the draft was pretty solid. And that's where they're operating to me in that smart fashion with exactly what I'm advocating for. You have to ascend if you're at the bottom, laughing out loud. You're right. That's right. Nowhere to go but up. Dante's Inferno. That's what I'm gonna. That's what I'm gonna call my theory. Brandon's Inferno. Where am I? I never understood why people hype up the Cardinals so much. They were ranked ahead of us by some last year. It's really weird. I figured it would have died down after Murray left. Yeah, I figured once Murray was exposed for what he was as a quarterback, that's okay. Are we done with this now? But this sort of trope kind of, I guess, lives on a little bit, to your point. And I'm confounded by it myself. I don't know why they get so much of that benefit of the doubt in this way, in this fashion. It doesn't quite add up to me. Jeffrey Thistle, thank you for the $2 donation. Move to Arizona or surface of the sun? I had certain times of year, Jeffrey, it's the same thing. I did a year in Arizona for college out in Tempe, and you literally will have your flip-flops melting on the concrete as you walk. Like they get sticky on the concrete as you're walking out there, you know? Like even the roaches can't take it when it's as hot as it gets. And it dries your nose out. It's a dry, that's the good news with it is at least it's not a humid place, but it's a heat that definitely you just can't get away from at certain times of year. And it's too much. Much too much. I think it's baking their brains a little bit too, Jeffrey. That's why the Cardinals can't win. Too much sun's too much. Maker of Charles is definitely happy about being traded. He posted out of there on his Instagram story. It seems like an interesting guy. Interesting move. Well, they're a Titan fan here that lives in Arizona, actually about 3 miles from Cardinal Stadium, but I think they have 9, 8, 10, and 7 talent, honestly. Oilers buying in a little bit into it. They don't even know what they have in a coaching staff yet. S, you just said it laughing out loud. Hey, great minds think alike in here, Chris. And we're kind of on that same page today here in the chat. I'm seeing that for sure. And that's just where I'm at. It's like, how do we, they just brought a new coach in. How are we giving them any, they had to, again, it doesn't add up. If the team's that close to being that good, they don't fire a coach. That's bottom line. The coach was fired because the team was not good. And they looked and said, yeah, this isn't good enough. We got to get better. Now the next coach might be better, but a guy that's never head coached in his life, never even been the full-time offensive coordinator on his team in the respect of actually just calling the plays fully 24/7. Like that's McVay's duties, right? I don't think we just go without benefit of the doubt that it's like, well, he'll absolutely be amazing. No doubt he'll be awesome. Maybe. I think you'd much stronger say that like Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and Mike Macdonald had all done more to earn their head coaching job when they got hired on the teams that they had versus what LaFleur's been hired. Kind of feels to me like with the Cardinals of like, well, no one else will take the job, so how about you? Or besides 6-7 years now, sweeping the cards, something like that. It goes on for this long, you just lose count. Mick, I couldn't put any money down confidently on the Cardinals on any game of theirs next year. No, they might be in almost every single game. There's a real good chance that they end up being right as we get up to the game, a not favored to win. You know? Jeffrey says, I feel bad for Mike, Niners, Rams, Hawks, and Mike. I do feel bad for Mike, and I get that he wants the team winning. I get that. I'm just trying to lead Mike to the light. You know, there's the hunger a man has to be a champion, and that hunger is a good thing. But when that hunger takes you from your intelligence, when that hunger robs you of your smart decision-making and the pursuit of your passion and hunger for the winning itself, then you are lost. Lost in that desert wilderness, stabbing yourself on the cacti. The native Navajo population would say it's called Imapa'aka, which means cardinal who breathes no life. You guys are making me want pie in the chat. Manny, hey, Brandon, how do you feel about the signing today? You can tell how serious Mike is to take special teams. I mean, that's I think you kind of took my words in that I think that there are teams that look at special teams and they say it's a necessary evil. It's something that we will get around to like spring cleaning or cleaning out your attic. And then there are other teams that look at it and they say, no, that could be a whole nother separate room of our house if we treat it right. And that's how I think the Seattle Seahawks take it. And I think that they really don't just say it. You have a great special teams, you're like, well, we really care about special teams. You can be a team that puts a lot in your kicker and punter, and you go, okay, we put our investment in. That should be done now. We'll get by with the rest of it. And then you can be a team that says, every turn of our special teams, every quantitative chamber of our special teams needs to be filled with a bullet. And I want a hollow point, extra TNT packed bullet put in place there at every turn on this. And that's what I think the Seahawks are doing with their special teams unit. With every gunner that will be on that field, with every blocker that will be on that field, they will all be there because they're one of the best, ideally from a Seahawks perspective, one of the best of the sport at what they do in that way. And Seattle's able to build that type of unit because so few teams value the unit in the same kind of fashion. I'm definitely eating some pie after the show today. We got a lot of pie mentioned in the chat right now. A lot of pie mentioned, and you guys are making me hungry for it. I don't know what pie it's going to be, but I'm taking down a pie tonight. See, down, it would be a mistake to trade Wilson for a low pick. Also, why help the Packers? You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I mean, John's got a soft spot for Green Bay, C-Town, you know? Like, if his old people call up and they're like, Johnny, come on. We've known each other 25 years. I remember when you were an intern here, man. We just need a little, just a little itsy bitsy teeny tiny, just a little itty bitty, just a little running back. You just throw it just one little itty bitty, just a little, you ain't even going to use him. You drafted one. You ain't going to even need him. I hear Charbonnet's ahead of track. I like how you think, C-Town. I like how you think on that. HHGB, I think the Cowboys don't belong in your team state. I think they need their own category. Call it the Cowboy state. Well, it is to your point, HHG. They've spent so long in purgatory that it may be that we have to forever call it Cowboy-orgatory. Purgocabity. Cowboy-ergity. That's what we'll call it from here on out, HHG. Because they've lived in that for now 30 years. So it's pretty much your home now at this point, right? You ain't ever getting out. Like a Twilight episode. How do I get out of here? You're never getting out, Jerry. There's got to be a way. Draft picks. Money. What will it take? I'll give you anything I need. Jerry, you're just going to be here forever. I want to win, though. I need championships. You already got your championships, Jerry. No, it's not enough. We need more. We're bigger in Texas. We don't care, Jerry. You're not really America's team. What? What'd you say? You're not really America's team. No! Jerry falling into darkness, forever falling through the darkness like Loki and Endgame, right? I've been falling for 45 minutes. Yeah, Wilson's definitely got some power. Flagstaff's cool. Flagstaff's kind of its own thing up there. You know, like the north and the south, Arizona are kind of two different places. Vibe, weather-wise, all that. Yeah, it's a nice little enclave up there, Charlie. Cardinals owner may be the worst in the NFL, so if one of the worst, there's an argument to be made for Bidwell. There is. Or besides, whatever, man, Mike is way too much homer, makes him look bad. Was calling a Cards win both times he played last year after years of being swept. Yeah, it's where I think, you know, it's where it's like, I get where, you know, he's coming from, where the optimism, the hope thing, and this is the line that we always have walked at times through years through here, Herbicide, you know, where it's like, optimism's great and positivity is great, but like, what are we doing here as far as content creators? Are we here to be positive and just to simply gas up the fandom and to make them just feel great about the team? Or are we trying to actually look at the team, be intelligent in how we're evaluating them, and then be able to actually give to the audience something that is a point of insight that maybe not clearly and easily seen then because of that. And sometimes the insight's not going to always be great. Sometimes the insight's going to have to be one, especially when you have one of the worst run organizations in the NFL. Bad looking insight on what you got to talk about. That's unfortunate, but like that is a bit of the nature of what you'd have to kind of do there if you're going to hope to get it corrected. If you don't put a spotlight to the problem never gets corrected. You always just kind of gloss over it or point the spotlight in every other place but where the problem lies itself. It continues to perpetuate. Nia says, if John trades for Myles Garrett, pencil in Seahawks three-peating and stacking up Super Bowls this century, then the Whiners and Lambs might catch up to the Whiners soon enough. I like it, man. It's going to be very interesting. I mean, it is going to be almost like, you can almost have like a Garrett watch where if he does become available, if this thing does really now come into gear here, this would be about the timing of it. If it was going to happen, boy, this could shift the balance any which way. Be it us get it, be it the Rams get a guy like that. I mean, he tilts the room in that direction, Nia, to that place. I agree. Warhammer guy, why do people in the Shanahan-McVay tree just not care about special teams? You'd think it was the amount of times it's burned them, it's been more of a focus. Lessons learned the hard way, I guess, Warhammer. It is odd. It is very odd. And I think it's more of a kind of a penchant thing of what you just, I think, kind of tend to see from coaches in general. I think especially offensive head coaches in general, it's probably a little bit of a trope, but it's one of those cliches that's a cliche for a reason, where you can find kind of a rich history of offensive-minded head coaches that are very caught up first on their offensive side of the ball, dominating a lot of what they're doing. And then they're trying to get their defense to chase as quickly as it can to catch up the offense. And a lot of the rest of the energy is kind of then being imparted to getting the defense up to where the offense is. And then the special teams kind of becomes the lost child at the bus station. You know, where's Billy at? Why isn't Billy in the car? I think he's still on the bus bench. We didn't get him. What? You know, it's a little bit of that. I think that ends up just kind of boiling out like that in that way with these kind of coaches, and that Sean and McVay aren't just unique in that way, but this is kind of an offensive minded thing that you see. I think the tough part of this becomes a little bit too from their standpoint, and that you have two teams that have been really good for a long period of time. And that means you have a roster that's probably going to be pretty well paid. And that means you're looking for the places and ways that you can kind of cut the corners to put some extra assemblage of money together to be able to afford other assets. And so now the quickest and easiest way is to kind of rob from like, I don't want to pay my kicker $7 million. Let's pay our kicker $2 million. And then we have $5 million to spend for Kyle Juszczyk. I think there's some of that kind of gets done as well on this a little bit with it. But thank God they've got that Achilles, man. And then it's just right there in the opening, vulnerable, no armor on the back of it. What's up, Dogzilla? Good to see you, bro. McFurrow, props to J. Harbaugh, too. I was hard on him the first year. I think rightfully so. I think he had a really rough first year, but he turned it around in a major way and had literally the best special team season in Seahawks history last year. They were phenomenal. Not just good, not just great. Phenomenal kick coverage all the way around, too. Just in every facet of the special teams game. Nia says, Myles Garrett worth that? Dude's coming off a record-breaking season, culminating in DPOI. Those games against the Lambs will be much more different and less stressful in 2025. I'm with you. I wouldn't push back against any of that. I think there's some people that have this hesitancy with Myles Garrett. I wouldn't. There's really not an amount with the draft capital when it comes to even 3 first-round picks where I'm going to be like, oh, I can't do that. Not where this team's at. Not for that player that you're bringing in. And, the other part of this for those people that might be hesitant on this move, are you still unwilling to make that move if you know that maybe the Rams are willing to do the same thing at the same time? Are you still willing to say no if they're willing to say yes? That's where it gets a little tough, doesn't it? It's one thing to look at it if you're a naysayer of the Garrett deal and be like, 3 first-round picks, 30 years old. I mean, come on, no. It's another thing that when I tell you, yeah, what if it's the Rams, though, they're on line 2? You're on line 1. You're offering 3. Rams are offering just short of 3. Or you're not willing to offer 3. It's going to take 3 to get him, and the Rams are offering just short of 3. And you're going to say no? You're going to say, no, go ahead and give him to the Rams instead. Just saying, it's a conundrum of a situation that could potentially pop up here. Mike has nothing to cheer for him. Let him have his predictions. It's the only way to get an emotional win. Banker, if Brando covered the Jets, Dolphins, Browns for the year, over under 7 games before Brando is on suicide watch, Brando would be it would be rough. My heart goes out to those guys. It does. Those guys that have to create that content and cover those teams. It would get dark, Banker. You'd have to just kind of lean into it after a while, and just try to find a way to have fun with it. Mew says, Hawk says, is there any news on us and Garrett? If we get him, that would be bonkers. Poggers. It does sound like I've heard nothing that there's any so there's things I've heard in the background a little bit as far as Garrett goes that the movement on this thing could be real. As far as Seattle being a front runner to land him and that they'd be the team that would emerge as that team in that way. I'm not so sure on that front of it, Mewtwo. But it does seem like this is going to come down before training camp. And that means to me in the next couple of weeks minimum, we're going to get the news on this Garrett thing one way or the other. And my thinking on this does become that the trade will happen, but we do not have a cemented team that there's really the hardline connection to at this point with Garrett, where it's like, well, he's going here. There's some soft connections in a couple different places. Seattle would certainly be in on it. Does come back down to, would John be living in a world where he'd be willing to give up 3 first-round picks if that's what it takes in a bidding war to get him? Saying he would rather have Purdy over Darnold was a wild take too. I love Darnold. Ignores all the disrespect though. Does his own thing. Yeah, I would definitely not take Purdy over Darnold. I take Darnold over Purdy all day on that one. That is weird. Riverside, Brandon, what's your favorite kind of pie? Settle the score. I don't have a fave pie. I gotta be honest with you. And I'm probably not going to be anybody's, I'm not going to be anybody's favorite. Everybody's going to be mad at my pick. I'd be like a chocolate cream with like a graham cracker crust kind of guy. Something like that. But I mean, I'm also not super picky I'm not a big fruit guy. So I'm not a big like pie. Even apples kind of like, it's fine. I'm not hating it, but it's like, it's fine. Dogzilla, thank you for the $2 donation. What outfit suits Mina Kinds the best? Any outfit. I can't do my thing. Yeah. Any outfit she wears fits fine. Fits the best. Every single one is the right answer on that one, Dogzilla. All of them. It's good to see you in the house, Dogzilla. Hope you're doing, man. Good, man. Thomas, Brando, Ian Rappaport reports Seattle's new ownership will come in August, and it could be more than $10 billion. Not surprising it would go for that. It's going to be very interesting to see who it was. I would have thought at this point we would have more of an emergence about the party that was actually, I mean, this stuff is very hard to not leak out and come out. The fact that they've been able to kind of keep it quiet. It's almost like, it feels like sometimes these names that get thrown out in the media every other day, and it's like a new name where it's like, it's Tim Cook, it's Gates, it's Ballmer, it's Cuban, it's the Celtic guys. You know, you're kind of hearing a, like every other day is like, and I almost feel like they're kind of just leaking out names on purpose to try to kind of throw us off the scent. But it does sound like this thing will kind of get around at some point or another here soon. I'm with you, Neil. I got no problem making that move. You would find me nodding my head and being fully willing to do this at this point, especially understanding, again, we're going to be competing with potentially both these two teams for the services of this man, possibly. Thomas says, I will take Myles Garrett, especially. That helps Seattle get more Super Bowl championships. And if I'm new ownership, I want to come out with a bang. I'd certainly sign off. I'd have my rubber stamp ready. You know, hey, new owner, yeah, we maybe want to make this Myles Garrett move, but you might be a little hesitancy at the new money. Nope, here's my stamp. Go ahead, you're good. No, I don't need no more. But he's going to cost, I don't care. The draft capital, yeah, it's okay. I trust you, John. You do what you do. That wouldn't be a no-brainer. Banker Brando, if I traded general managers for 2 years, how different would our roster look in that time span? Good question, man. I think that the real key difference between the two would be, I think that Snead's a little bit more on, I'm willing to trade high draft capital, being first round pick kind of capital. I think John's willing to do that, but I think if he's more of a, fine market value trade deadline deal kind of guy with that type of stuff, or it's a third or it's a second round pick at the trade deadline at the most, more than it's me just on a yearly basis kind of flinging first round picks around. And so there'd be more of, I think, investment in the first round, nature of that's the first place where just more of those picks are coming in. I don't think that there's a lot different from how you set up the Stafford situation. Don't think he would have done the Ty Simpson move. I think that was one that John was definitely very surprised about. And you would have had probably like a Mekhi Lemon in there right now, or any number of other kind of players possibly in there as an alternative. I even think like John might have done like a Reuben Bain, and then, looked at having like Byron Young being the guy that he allows to move on after the year, and then or trades now and gets a pick for future years and then has Bain come in or whatever there, right? Banker, or I'd probably just play him out through the year. And then, he'd pay a guy like Verse, whereas I think Schneid's probably likely to, end up trying to seemingly kind of pay everybody a little bit on that line. It seems like Kobe's getting paid, Verse is getting paid. I think as well, Young will probably get paid on that side of it. But, I don't know if there's a ton of steeped difference in their approach. Both of these guys have coaches that, have a lot more similarities to the offenses they run than differences, including even down to Banker, the 12 personnel and the 13 personnel, which we also run a heavy amount. West Coast offenses, a little more inside zone, outside zone. But I don't know if that impacts a lot. John's always had a predilection towards heavier, bigger interior offensive linemen, which was something you guys have kind of gravitated towards recently. I think there'd be for where things are kind of built, a lot of, similarities there on that side of it. I don't think that you would have seen the McDuffie trade this offseason. John would have traded for McDuffie, but John wouldn't have paid McDuffie on trading him, the $30 million contract. But much more smaller differences than major differences. Chris says, Garrett has right of refusal in his contract. I wonder if it came down to us or LA, would he refuse us? Well, hopefully you know that going in before you start offering. So does this guy even want to come here? We'll let you know once we've got all the capital in place. What's up, Bido? How you doing, man? It's good to see you. Thank you for reminding me of that. Please do hit that like button if you get a chance for me, please, folks. Helps the channel grow and show. We're growers here. We're not showers. Thomas, honestly, I believe Jody is close to selling it. Depends on financial stuff, but I won't be surprised that the new ownership has been involved or will be soon. Me neither. This kind of sounds right. C-Town says no 3 first-rounders. Addicted Brandon, not worried about spending the trade capital, but do the Hawks have the cap space for the first year? Yeah, I would. You got plenty of space. Remembering with this, you're sitting on $28 million of cap space right now, Addicted, and then you also have $500,000 of dead money. So you have what that means is you both have cap space, and then you have the salary cap levers to where you can base to bonus just a couple of guys' deals and have then more than an amount of space that you need to get the deal done at that point. Either or gets it done. Seattle is in as beautiful a territory as they've been cap-wise in 15 years. Their health-wise, cap-wise cannot be understated here. The dead money's down. The future dead money's down. The contractual commitments are in good places. You don't have a bad money contract on the books like you did at certain times with the Diggs deal or the Jamal Adams deal or Jimmy Graham deal. This deal, it's not there anymore. None of those deals are anymore on the books. So you're just you're in a place where you can do whatever you really want. I can't do Cherry. I just can't. Brian says, I will not be entering into a bidding war for Garrett. No way, no how. Blow up all of your cap and half of our draft picks for one splash player when we just won a Super Bowl without doing that. I get it, man. I get it. I just feel like with Garrett, it's a different territory, and I'm not damn the torpedoes come hell or high water. I do think that if you're sitting down and the Rams are part of this equation and you're thinking about them going to the Rams and you know it's coming down to you and the Rams as it is on top of it, that can be, if it's coming down to 50-50, that can be at least a little bit to push you past the finish line. But I get it. It'd be the most to give up of any player in NFL history. And it's not, going to be cheap. I don't know that he blows your cap up and that he can come to you and say, now you got to pay me a new contract. Remembering with this, because the Browns are essentially at this point eating both the void year money that's on the Garrett deal and then eating as well the bonus money that was given to him initially. The cap hits on this is going to be in a fairly okay space going into the future. Like, it isn't going to be to where you're necessarily killing your cap just to accommodate Garrett. But I get it. Brandon loves Warrant cherry pie. She's my cherry pie. Looks so good, make a grown man cry. Sweet cherry pie. It's a great song. Rams House in the house. What's up, Rams House? That JSN OTA clip was insane. The ball placement was so impressive too. They're looking good, man. It's the way it works with quarterbacks and receivers, and you guys will get the benefits of this probably this year with Devontae Adams and Stafford, and that you get the guys through now 2-3 years together where it's not only the on-field reps in games and training camp, but the OTAs and the off seasons of throwing to each other when nobody's got a camera on you. Like, these guys work together like that. You get into the same page where the QB and the receiver both just understand each other perfectly, and ball placement and where the receiver wants the ball and how the ball is coming out of the quarterback's hands, how you track the ball. All these little things get refined in that process. And you're going to get that this year with those guys, I think, in a major way, Rams House. It's good to see you, brother. I hope you're doing well. Black tie moose cake's good. Yeah, I'm with that. Olive Garden's got some bangers, man. The cheesecakes aren't bad either. It's going to be a fun year this year, Rams House, man. It's going to be another year with just you and my team going head to head, bro. More Hammer Jeremiah Love was on the St. Brown podcast and didn't know who Goff was. Nia says, I'm going to need for the Marlboro Man's grandson to be part of the Seahawks being the only franchise to three-peat for Super Bowls. That would be a good 3-year run, man. Woo! What would it take to get Ty Simpson? Probably a lot. No way the Rams are going to move him at this point for the next couple of years. He's a first-round pick, top 15 first-round pick, so he's carrying a heavy amount of bonus money. They'd have to eat that dead money quick. Thomas says, especially if Hall gives you so much crap to resign, and if I could pick the DVOY over Hall, then I'm taking Garrett. Yeah, well, and that's where, can that lower you down to 2 first-round picks in a Hall then at that point, and maybe something else in, I think that's where I'm, where there is a creative way to maybe get this deal done to where it's like Hall's going to cost at this point minimum 22, 23 million. I'm looking at the cap hits for Garrett, and he's got a 1.3 base salary, a $15 million. So the signing bonus is there. And then he's got the $26 million signing bonus thing that clicks in. I mean, the cap hits are not going to be huge here. It's down the line 29. It gets up that. Yeah, if you don't have to do much to really change this contract, it's not that bad. It's not $40 million a year you're paying here. What if Richard Branson bought the Seahawks, relocated them to Manchester? I'd get very angry about that. I think it's possible. Chris, wonder how long JS would tolerate Puka's drama. Kind of all depends. Locker room, I think, is a big side of that, and how you operate in the locker room. I think Seattle does have an organization that's been pretty willing to accommodate unique personalities through the years, even guys that could be problematic in the locker room. I think it takes a Percy Harvin type to be pretty extreme and be getting into like fist fights with Golden Tate and like during Super Bowl week, and then just completely being, kind of a problem child the next year. I think that it takes pretty extreme stuff for John to get to that place of things. I don't know if Puka's necessarily gotten to that state. Charlie, Brandon, did you watch any tape of OTAs? Rookie running backs looked really good. Very quick feet. Yeah, they look good. I mean, it's when it's not in pads and players are in pads. I always take that stuff with a little bit of grain of salt. Most people do look good when you're kind of in that deal, but I think it has stood out that you can see in Jadarian that he looks explosive. You can see that he runs really well behind his pads. He's a little bit of a longer legged guy, but he's got an ability to really run well behind his pads, which just helps you on some of your lateral change of direction, helps you on contact balance, which is of course one of the real strong points of keys of his game. But he looks well built, solidly built guy. First look, definitely looks the part. That's for sure. Thomas B, what would be Rams' reaction if Seattle trades for Garrett, especially if Ram fans are not happy with the draft? Rams house is in the house. He could probably give us a little bit of a read on that one, but I think that they would be pretty frustrated. I think that they would be punching some air pretty heavily, because you're only helping them from a Ram perspective. And this is a little bit of the predicament I have as a worry of if Seattle doesn't make this move, and if the Rams did to the other side of this, is that if they get Garrett, it's like, well, now your eyes are turning very quickly on to Max Crosby, and he may or may not even be available. He may or may not even be really healthy. And then you go, well, boy, you might just be stuck for the team that's kind of left holding the bag on that one in this division if a team is able to get this guy. So there's a pretty good level of concern for me on this one, especially as much as the Rams landing it. But I think that they would be in the commiserate position, Thomas, if the shoe was on the other foot. So I don't think you can necessarily say, okay, it's an arms race. Now we'll go build our nuke. Well, we're out of uranium. That was the last of the uranium we had. Better go find some yellow cake from Africa. Dogzilla, why do we care what the Seahawks sell for? I don't think we do. I think it's just kind of interesting. I think as well that if you have a team like the Seahawks that sell for $2.5 billion more than the Washington Commanders got sold for, or Denver Broncos got sold for, I think that also is at least I think it's cool in the respect of it speaks to the fact that this is actually a valuable franchise. And that when you're looking at every other franchise, one after the other, that are going for only merely $500 million more than the last one, and now you have this next one that goes for a couple billion more, I think that does speak to how successful this franchise has been and the type of prestige it's built in this league to be able to drive that. But past that, there's not really much to take away from it. I like yellow cake chocolate. I'm more of a cake than a pie guy. I will say that. I can go for just about any cake. Yeah, I care more about who the Seahawks sold to as well. There's definitely some landmine owners that you could run into, it seems like. Kevin O'Connell, us versus Rams for Garrett would be straight arms race, U.S. versus Russia. It is that, man. It is absolutely that. You shake your head and you're like, man, this cannot get more competitive. We're bandying about this right now at this point, and where these franchises are at, coming off the season they're coming off of. You just sort of shake your head and your eyes go wide and you go, man, I can't believe it's here. Riverside, if we got miles, I bet other teams would tap out before they got in the field. You joke, but you're not wrong. You want to talk about walking into a week where you're like, we're taking the L this week. You're talking about walking in the week where we've got a couple of guys that are online where we could play them or they could be served to be rested. Even if we're playing them against these team coach, we're losing. Might as well just rest them. So you kid, man. Juan says, I can tell by simple videos, these players and coaches are still hungry and are taking every rep with purpose. I get that sense as well. And you felt it at the end of the season where so many players at the end of the year when they win the Super Bowl are just completely at that point of release and we did it. And there was just so much given up to get here and I just don't have anything left in the tank. I laid it all on the line. I got nothing left. I'm tapped out. It took everything we could did, every last inch of my being to get to this spot. That wasn't what you heard from the Seahawks players at the end of the year. That wasn't what you're hearing from the coaches. It was more of a forlorn, kind of sad that the season has to come to an end. Oh, yeah, just kind of weird that it's just kind of coming to an end. There's not going to be practice next week. It's kind of strange. I don't know. Just sort of, that's kind of a little bit indicator of how hungry this team is. They wanted to get back at it in a certain way. Charlie B, hypothetical, would 2 Super Bowls and a 14-3 would 2 Super Bowls and 3-time 14-3 get you in the Hall of Fame? Would 3-time Super Bowl winner clinch it? What stats matter in modern NFL? I think that it does take more than the winning seasons to do it. I think it takes more than winning the 2 Super Bowls to do it. I mean, Eli Manning is going to be a very good indicator about whether or not this factors in. He's got 2 Super Bowl wins, but then not a lot else other than some cumulative stats that he was able to put together. But I think it's probably going to take a little bit of all of the stuff. You're going to need some of the stat backing to get it done. In addition to that, Charlie, I think it is going to be one where to get into the future, you're going to need to have a little bit more than just the pure Super Bowls. If we're talking about this being 1987, maybe that's the case, but with more players and more guys statistically that push you down the line, it means you probably got to be a little bit more, with it. Vaughn, Garrett's best interest in his 30s should be joining dark side defense. Mike Macdonald ain't retiring anytime soon. I mean, this would be the funnest one for him, that's for sure. All the flavor Mike could run to make teams pay the price for daring to double team Garrett. Get out of here. Dogzilla, thank you for the $2 donation. Do we like Fleury's beard? I don't know. I was kind of thinking about it the other day. Do we have any great offensive coordinators in NFL history that have rocked the ZZ Top beard? I can't think of any. On one hand, I feel like it gives him the power of Odin. On the other, I'm like, you got the long beard because he's hiding the weak chin. Is that what we're doing here? It's all right. Rams House, I wouldn't be happy if you guys got Garrett. I'd be selfishly rather have him come here or stay in the AFC. I bet you would. Just can't see us giving up that kind of capital for Garrett. Yeah. My worry right now comes down to, I feel like John would be willing to give up 2 and the Rams would be willing to give up 3. That's where my worry really comes up, where I'm like, John's in on it. He puts a serious offer on the table, or we go to the Browns and we're like, the Rams are like, we'll give up 2 first rounds and then we'll give up Byron Young. And then we're like, we'll give up 2 first rounds and we'll give up Derek Hall. And they're like, yeah, we like the Rams offer better. Yeah, Garrett would push this into a stratosphere. Ballmer's my favorite too, C-Town, as far as, I guess, the hopeful one of at least the names that have been thrown out there so far. Mick Brandon, Falcons fans have been posting Tua highlights from OTAs. Should we be scared? I saw some Kyler Murray throws too, where I'm like, people were getting gassed up on some of those, and I'm like, guys, it is OTAs here. Let's chill. They're throwing on air, you know. Rams, B, I thought the Garrett was almost unreadable this year due to the contract, and then he becomes much more tradable contractually next year. Am I wrong? They took a $26 million vested bonus that was due to hit in spring this year, and they pushed it into September. It's not a guarantee that it's going to then have him moved, but I've been offering Rams houses that there's no reason to move the money from spring to September. It's not saving you. It's into the new league year. It's league year for league year. It's the same league year for same league year. So there's no reason to move that money down into training camp unless the intention is to get off the Rams books, because you're going to have moved him to a new team, and the new team will then sustain that bonus option when it then hits in training camp. So I'm doing some math here, but I think it's pretty solid math as well, because otherwise the move makes zero sense. Other than maybe they just would want to do it just for the option if a team were to blow them away, I guess. And then they don't get blown away with a good option. Dig to Brandon. For me, Jadarian looks like a stud from head down to the knees, but calves down to the ankles seem a little underdeveloped. I might be tripping, but not sure. It's hard to say on that stuff. It is. Some people just don't have calves that show really well. You know, they're strong, but they just don't look like they're strong. Hard to say. He looks pretty thick. He looks like a running back. He looked like a tiny guy out there, or smallish guy. Ice cream is the best dessert, that's for sure. I'm kind of a popcorn guy too. Corey, hey Brando, everyone is acting like the Rams won the Super Bowl. I think that's fine because there's more pressure on the Rams than us this upcoming season. I kind of agree. I think there is a growing amount of more pressure on them. And I think that people kind of forgetting about us and kind of just us in the background, just kind of existing this offseason like we have as the champions. I think it's kind of it helps us. I think we get to just kind of concentrate on what we're doing and let everybody else put their hype in other places. And I do think there's a kind of a growing pressure on the Rams. I do think that they feel Father Time breathing on their back, their neck, and that Super Bowl window is shutting closed bit by bit more and more. But yeah, I've seen the same thing, man. It's been a wild offseason to be the champs, but that you seem to get very little respect for it, where people seem to treat it at times nationally like a luck thing or something, or a random thing that just happened this one year, and that'll never happen again. Yeah, kind of interesting on that, huh, Rams house? Very little interesting note there. And it did make him in a place where now they could move him at that point, and not that they're not going to eat some dead money there. They will eat some dead money. But if they're getting back the draft capital, they're getting back in return, it can be made worth their while. And part of why maybe you're more willing to give draft capital for those that are a little bit naysayers to the Garrett situation here. If you know you're getting Garrett coming in and you don't have to give him the new contract extension, and you know he's coming in and you're getting him at a significantly reduced cost from what he would have costed on the books to the Browns, maybe that has you a little more willing to give up more draft capital because of that. Hard to say. Seahawks Daddy Ballmer signed off on the trade that sent 5 firsts and SGA for Paul George. He's my least favorite pick. I get it. Basketball is a tough one, though, too. I mean, building the winner in basketball versus football is you just can get stuck and limited in your options and start to get a little bit desperate. I do like that he's at least trying to build the Clippers into a winner and not just own the team. I preferred Brennan before he, for some reason, shaved off that huge beard he was sporting. I always had a small beard. Yeah, Ballmer said the iPhone would never take off. Yeah, I've technically personally been let go by Ballmer in my life. So if anybody would have a bone to pick with Ballmer in this chat, it would be me. Because he came down and took out our project back in the day, 10 years ago in Seattle. Whole building of people working on we're working on the tablet at that time, what was eventually going to become the tablet. That time it was called Team Austin. Chris, Browns could always want more quarterbacks. Munkin is not too thrilled currently. Dangle a Milrow and 2 firsts. Laugh it out loud. I kid. Don't want to give up more than a single first, which wouldn't do it. I get it, man. Yeah, it's uncomfortable when you start getting to that many firsts that it would cost. And maybe there is a creative way to get the deal done in that fashion, Chris. You never know it that way. Water Dude. Hey, B. Go Hawks, Water Dude. It's good to see you. Warhammer, the OG days of Brandon Goatee complaining about our draft picks. Ah, the good old days. Jago says Bomber's going to run the Hawks like he did Window Vista. Sorry, Steve, you're getting drug on the comments today a bit, brother. Go. A question. If Bo Stevens beats out Bradford by 2027, which top 2 position groups would you invest in the most in the 2027 draft beside edge? Obvious need, assuming there's no clear BPA at our early picks. I think center becomes possibly a really big option because with Sundell, you don't know if he's for sure the long term guy there. And you'd like to keep that position cheap with a rookie contract kind of also, I think, if you're now have Stevens in there to where you can kind of roll that. In off ball inside linebacker, both the Will and the Mike. I mean, you stole edge is definitely going to be one that you're targeting, and you might go 2 deep on in next year's draft, Cope. Grabbing 2, not just 1. It does get harder through some of the rest of the positions because, you have so many guys with so much depth, especially if Leonard Williams comes back on the defensive line. I do think this is probably Jaron Reed. So defensive tackle is probably another one. So defensive tackle, off ball, inside linebacker, center would be probably the main positions I would think that'd be kind of, if there isn't a clear BPA guy there that you'd be a little bit more gravitating towards as far as like trying to target. But, you touched on it. I think edge is one that's going to be very much a focus to some degree. Besides, we need to draft like 3 edges next year. JL says, this is bad timing for Seahawks sale. Billionaires too busy buying bunkers at the moment. I would buy it, but my bunker budget's taking it all out of me. Brian says, too bad Bomber canned you. I would have sung your praises over at my MS Surface. Oh, let's go. Well, luckily it wasn't me, but a whole building. And I was just a contractor at the time. I was a lowly, as they used to call it back in the Microsoft days, dash trash. But yeah, he came in there and they had been at it for a year. I'd only been on the team for a couple months and they'd been at it for a year, and he came in there and he did not like what he saw, I guess, on their prototype design. Babyface Brando. I'm not in my heel phase yet. I'll get back in my heel facial hair days soon. Yeah, DT is probably one that's in on it. LeBon, Brandon, what is your thoughts on the article stating Deebo Samuel could join the Hawks? I mean, it's possible. It's possible. I don't know if I really would understand fully the fit, to be honest with you. Bobo's on this roster now and locked in as basically your fifth receiver. Your fourth and fifth receiver are probably both going to need to be more special teams guys. Debo's not doing no special team stuff at this point in time of his career. Maybe you can get that on the rest of your guys, corners, safeties. Maybe you can pull it from other places. So I guess it's possible. But I don't know if I would really see as much the necessity or the intelligence in adding him. It just doesn't feel like a move that needs, it doesn't seem like he's got a lot left in the tank. He's definitely got to fit to this offense and he knows this offense, but you already have a bunch of guys that play more slot. He's not really an outside guy anymore. You already have a ton of slot guys. You got your slot guys already playing on the outside. I don't know. Maybe we're just going to have slot receivers 24/7 here, but I don't know. I couldn't see the fit on that. Another running back. Well, depending on what happens with the Zach Charbonnet situation, another running back could be on the table. Certainly, I would expect by that point, Walker, Holani might be moved on. That's a good suggestion. Very much in play. Howard, DT, Chris says DT. I think DT is definitely there. I think Jaron Reed's definitely on his way out after this year, and Leonard Williams is a little bit of a who knows game right now at the moment. Dig to Brandon. Love the center pick, please. Yeah, it's where if I'm John, I'm tactically looking at this offensive line where I'm like, all right, I paid my left tackle. You got to do that. I paid my right tackle. Got him on a pretty market equitable deal, though it's a lot of money. I'm going to pay Gray Zabel a lot of money here in a couple of years. Can I keep center and right guard relatively inexpensive so I can load balance the rest of my salary cap to the rest of the positions on my roster? And that's where if I'm John, that's how I'd be attacking this. Howard says right tackle if Lucas's knee doesn't hold up. Definitely possible. Earl J. Coley, I used to be dash trash too, laughing out loud. So glad I got out of there for a higher paying job that treated me better too. Yeah, it's a little bit of you're twisted both ways back in the day in Microsoft as a contractor. Cause like on one hand, you come in, you do your job, nobody messes with you, nobody seems to care. It's pretty cool. Like you're fairly well paid and doing it. But on the other hand, you're in a tiny little cubicle. You may not have a view of a window. You're just you don't have a lot of interaction with teams. You're just kind of sitting in your little cubicle doing your work. It can get a little dark, Earl. They get to the summertime and all the employees are out playing softball and stuff, taking the whole day off, and you're just sitting there alone in this office. Yeah, it gets a little rough. I'm glad I wasn't the only one that went through it on that. Corey, thank you for the $2 donation. At least we don't have Kelly Stoffer anymore, laughing out loud. Hey, true enough there, man. We had a dark path before we've gotten through some of these recent really good quarterback play. And guys, we've been pretty lucky. Russell, Geno, Sam Darnold. It's not a bad 1, 2, 3 stack versus, where we went for a while there, especially once you got out of the Craig days and Stoffers and Kemps and Freeze and McGuire and Brock Heward. God bless you, man. Just couldn't quite get it there. You had some years in the 90s there where you just could not find a QB and you tried hard, which is weird because you spent the 80s kind of not trying hard enough. If you just tried a little harder in the 80s, you would have been never having to deal with the stuff in the 90s. But because you didn't decide to make the leap for Warren Moon or throw the extra first round pick for John Elway in the trade, or listen to your head coach who wanted Brett Favre and instead listen to your owner who wanted Mark McGuire's brother, you've been in a little better place. Manny says, well, not the great moves by Baltimore. At least he didn't hesitate to make big moves. Yeah. I don't think he'll shrink away from it. I think he'll listen to the experts and what they're telling him to in the front office. Yeah, Cope, I'm with you. It just feels kind of like pointless him coming at this point. If Hawks sign deep, I'll be a Cowboy fan tomorrow. The contractors are mercenaries, IMO. They will not rock the boat on critical design decisions from my 37 years in programming. It's true. We're definitely going to come in there and just do what we're told to do, But it was also Microsoft's kind of funny way of avoiding having to actually pay people wages and stuff, because you come in as a contractor, you do a year, they make you wait 100 days, and then you can come back in and be a contractor again. And that was how they sort of subverted paying guys full-time wages. But again, it was Yeah, they did pay pretty well for doing it. I'll give them that on it. At least they didn't, cheap you out on the front end if you're going to come in like that. Gun for hire. Charlie Unicorn, listening to the quarterback name, starts twitching on the ground. It was dark back to back, one after the other there. It was rough. And again, you put some capital up for these guys. McGuire cost you a first round pick. I don't remember if it was Stauffer or Kemp, but they cost you a first round pick. Yeah, Brock was a second round pick. You were trying. You were throwing darts. Cope, I want to see Locke in a regular season game again, even if it's just cleanup duty during a blowout game. I'd be with that. I've called that's our new victory formation, Cope. Like all those plebes, right? All those peasant franchises, their victory formation is coming out there with their starting quarterback taking a name. Our victory formation is our quarterback in the midway through the fourth quarter backup coming out there to hand the ball off. That's our victory formation. War Titan says, what about taking Jim Kelly or Dan Marino instead of Kurt Warner in 83? It was a different time then, I would say. I wouldn't have been opposed to grabbing either of those two guys while they were Titan. It's just, this was also an era in the 80s. You can attest to this. You had Earl Campbell there in the late 70s, right around this time period, right? And so, it was very much a similar kind of fashion where running backs were driving the bus. It was not as much of quarterbacks or the fundamental key point, right? They became that. They became that through the mid to late 80s. But at that time in 83 where you were drafting, it was a running back dominated sport, as evidenced by the fact that you saw two running backs taken in the top 3 picks of that first round, in Dickerson and in Warner. And Warner would have been every bit as good as Dickerson. Because nobody Oiler Titan looks at that and says, well, the Rams shouldn't have taken Dickerson there, right? They should have taken Jim Kelly or Dan Marino. They say, no, he should have taken Dickerson. But Kurt Warner went out and led the AFC, I think, in rushing in his rookie year. But then he just had a catastrophic knee injury then into his second year on the AstroTurf and never was really the same player, even though he had a very good career after that. But it wasn't an improper pick for the time because of how the game was run, by the limitations of the passing attempts, by the heavy amount of volume of interceptions that were thrown by quarterbacks at that times, which didn't help their cause. It's kind of just different place. Chris says, we wanted Allen and Kermit. Mahomes too. We did. Yeah, we were in on both those two guys. Nathan Tucker, thank you for the $2 donation, Nathan. Thoughts on the Josh Jacobs news? It's been crazy. It's been wild. It really has. And it's one where it's, I think, especially strange because there are those players that are a little bit of head cases and problems. And then when something happens, you go, well, I'm not surprised with his history. But with a guy like Josh Jacobs, everything about this guy going back to college is that he is a very clean character guy, that he is a very much well-grounded human being, that there's not this kind of stuff there and sort of inside him and whatnot. You can catch people on the worst of days at times, I guess, and stuff can, catch the guy on the wrong day, and anything's kind of possible, I suppose. But it seems pretty serious, these charges that are being presented out, and it seems pretty, it's got to be tremendously disappointing for a Packer organization right now that is really hoping this year that they can go out there and finally really see Jordan Love realize the potential that he's offered up, and that it's going to be hard for him and this team to get to where they're wanting to get to go if they don't have Josh Jacobs toting the rock for them. Even to be out for 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 games on a suspension like that, say nothing of losing a whole season. But by the charges, I would say that you're definitely looking at, a pretty hefty suspension at this point from Josh's standpoint of this. And remembering, Nathan, that the NFL got back the power here years ago to be able to basically come in and throw out judgments without any real need of proof or investigation. You can just come in and say, we just generally are going to give you this because this happened. So I think he's going to be probably facing that. I don't think the Packers, with the offseason they've had and the losses that they've had, from Rashawn Gary to the 2 receivers that they lost, the linebacker that they lost, I don't think they're in a position to be able to accommodate this. It's a very strange kind of bit of news there for the Packers on this one, but very sad. And stuff randomly sometimes can happen, man, I guess, on it. Thank you for the dono, though. This is that time of year where they always say the bad stuff happens, though, This is the time that always has the coaches most concerned and worried. This is the time of year, I think, where Mike Macdonald took the ATV off his forehead. Yeah, it's kind of like it's a full moon month for about the next 45 days. Addicted Brandon Earl Campbell was the bus, not driving the bus. Oh, goodness. Yeah, Earl was fun to watch, man. And his highlights are still fun to watch. I wanted Oilers to take Dickerson. Second family didn't want him playing in Texas. Oilers traded down to 9 with Rams. Oilers got Bruce Matthews. He didn't end out too bad on that. You know what I mean? You wouldn't end out too bad with Dickerson either, but Matthews, I mean, Jesus, he freaking played 17 years for you guys, didn't he, Oiler? I want to say. Felt like he was there for 2 decades. Played like every offensive line position, started every offensive line position for you guys, I think. Warhammer guy, apparently Josh Jacobs and Henry Ruggs are close friends. Mm. Yikes. Nathan Tucker, thank you for the $2 donation. If he's convicted, his career's done. He's cooked. Yeah, well, and especially you're playing the running back position where it's not one where the NFL is going to hold on to you long anyway, right? They're already kind of looking at you as a running back of like, are you close to the end? You getting close? How about now? You close now? You close now? I think if these charges do hit, it's going to be very hard for him. Especially if it's, again, if the charges hit and he's given a year suspension, is somebody coming back to Josh Jacobs a year from now after he's done what he's done to a woman, which I think the NFL, rightfully so, has gotten much more sensitive to the players on this, where 20 years ago it was kind of like, it's like we put in the same category as, driving recklessly or, drunk driving, it's like that. It's like, well, and there's some general managers like John himself has said it, that if you put your hands on a woman, I ain't going to touch you with a 10-foot pole. And so, to your point on this, it both is the suspension and the fact that you'll have the general managers who just will not even consider him, even if he's got something left in the gas tank at that point. There's probably always going to be one franchise that'll be like, well, we're willing to do it. There'll be a Bengal franchise where it's like, we can get Josh Jacobs. And but he did this to it. Yeah, whatever. We can get Josh Jacobs. We're broke. So I will say that I think that there'll always be a team to make an exception there a year down the line. But it's bad news for this upcoming year. And bad news for his career, and awful decision on his part. I will say though too, to the other side of it, Nathan, you had this whole situation play out early on this offseason with the Falcons pass rusher James Pierce, and he had like this initially where you're looking at this laundry list of police stuff that just happened, including I think he like running over an officer or hitting an officer with his car. And like now you're watching the wheels of justice slowly kind of unwind the deal, almost in a sort of like, well, we still got to let this guy be able to play. Like if we hit him too hard, his career is going to be done. So I don't know if that's going to play out here too with this. Hopefully not. But that's also what gets me hesitant, is just saying he's just purely, done. And sometimes this stuff can get a little bit dirty down the line on how it gets shaken out. Definitely some serious charges, though. If convicted, he's looking at 3 or more years in prison. Golly. Cope, Brando, which NFC team outside of the NFC West do you fear the most? I know Eagles have the flaws, but they are my dark horse this year. Hurts plays like a different guy in the Super Bowl. Laughing out loud. That's true. I was given this thought the other day because we were having talk last night at the round table about the fact that I just felt like the NFC was just kind of disappointing this offseason, and so many teams took the one step forward, but also a step back in their approach a bit. Yeah, I think I think you do touch on it with the Eagles, because to me with the Eagles, what you have is first a very winnable division. I mean, their worst case scenario, as far as if things get the worst for us in this division this year, the hardest it possibly can be is that we have to deal with a Cowboy team. Like, we're going to run roughshod over probably the Giants. We're going to probably run roughshod over the Commanders. And then maybe we've got a little bit of an issue here with the Cowboys. You do look at them, and I do think the offensive line's gotten older, but it still remains very talented and a very complete offensive line. They lose A.J. Brown, but they have done a good job of being able to accommodate that loss by bringing in Dontavian Wicks and by bringing in then Mekhi Lemon to be able to overcome that. It's also a team that runs the ball a good amount of times, so it's not much of a necessity that you have a plethora of pass catchers necessarily there. Defensively, they still have a very stacked group there when you look across it. Like, all three levels of their defense, there are players there. Jordan Phillips and Jalen Carter are a problem inside. Jonathan Grenard gives them a better pass rusher than anything they had last year. I think that strong inside at the Mike linebacker position. Was Campbell there? I think it is. Yeah, I think they're the team that would probably be the one that certainly could be a dark horse type of team in how they're structured if they can get their offense kind of fixed. They still got Vic Fangio out there with the cover 2 shell, and he knows how to run that thing. They almost emerged, though, for me, Cope, as much because of the teams that didn't step forward this offseason. That because that one step back approach, like if the Lions had truly been able to add on top of what they had last year, if the Bears just pure and simply added on top of what they had last year, I might feel different about this. If the Packers didn't feel like they were constantly bleeding talent the last 2 years rather than adding talent, I might feel a little bit differently about this. But they almost kind of win this one, Cope, because of how many teams have been kind of sucking wind in the NFC and some of their approach. And I might be proven to be wrong on this, but it just does feel a little bit like that. I don't think another team's going to give Ruggs a second chance once he gets out. I think that thing's done. Charlie Jacobs, once a Raider, always a Raider. Yeah, Corey, even if not convicted, probably a year suspension. You know, NFL doesn't have to have conviction on this. They can just come in with a hammer and, lay it down. Jack Maloney, the thing about Garrett is he's always getting doubled. If we traded for him you can't do that. What are you going to do? Double Garrett? Leave Leo on a single block or Murphy? Good luck, NFL. It's a great point, Jack. This is exactly one that I've tried to present, I think, to some of the people that are naysayers of the Garrett thing and not understanding this a little bit, is it's not merely just a guy that goes out there and gives you this production and gives you the defensive player of the year. It's a guy that you bring into this defense who has spent the significant portion of his career getting double teamed and being a centerpiece of offenses, putting resources to stopping him playing and play out. And with a Mike Macdonald defense, part of the fun of this defense is that if you start drawing double teams this year, this way off of a stack box or simulated pressure, I'm going to have a free rusher, and I can create that free rusher almost every single time. Hence, eventually forcing you to peel that double team away from that player, forcing you to have to single block that. And Mike has a system and scheme that can force that, where there's other systems Garrett's played in where it's just a front four running 24/7. And that's where, to me, there's, I think Mike's got a lot of little bells and whistles and twists and turns that he could bring to play that could really maximize a guy like Garrett in that fashion. Very much agreed. Yeah, dang, Nathan, that sounds like a brutal car wreck, bro. Hopefully your mom's okay. ComCom Popcorn would also hurt the Packers since we took Emmanuel Wilson from them this offseason. Indeed. Yeah, they don't exactly have a super stacked running back room. It'd be a little bit questionable if there's no Josh Jacobs there right now. Would be interesting to see if Jordan Love can carry the Packers, especially now that they peeled back some of the receivers, because part of the nice thing with Love through the last couple of years is you had 5-6 receivers you can throw to. You still have a lot now. Not that you still got a variety of guys there, but you lose a couple this offseason that have been, especially in Dobbs' case, kind of a security blanket for Love. ComCom, also, hello, Brando. Love your content as always. Thank you, ComCom. Appreciate CoCom, not ComCom, CoCom. Let me say it right, CoCom Popcorn. I can't read here a couple hours in the stream, but appreciate you, man. Thank you. Yeah, I have a hard time seeing Jordan Love be able to come up in the clutch or be able to hold this down for a season and carry the load. It's a guy that just has not really come forward in his game. He's a good quarterback and immensely talented. You can see arm strength, mobility, throwing off platform, ability to improvise at times, but he's still a one-read Charlie to me, and that is not where he should be this deep into his career, especially for a guy that sat for 3 years on the bench. Once I bring you off the bench after 3 years, you better be progression reading. And if you don't do it after 3 years on the bench, then you probably aren't going to do it. See down, hey Brando, why do you let Jake get away with saying there are no health concerns with Stafford? I mean, it does get to a point where if I push back on everything that Jake says that I disagree with on the front of, we're going to spend 3 hours it'll be a back and forth, me and Jake arguing for 3 hours, which may be very entertaining, but I don't know if the rest of the two guys would appreciate that in the deal. So it's got to be a balance game at times and picking my fights and keeping the flow of the show going, in the right way. And I mean, it's something that people have pointed out in the comments, when you are just effusively just so praising of your organization, over the top, overflowing it every way. It's like, it kind of becomes obvious without me even needing to point to it. And I think the Ty Simpson stuff definitely puts a spotlight on this, too, but I try to do where I can. I try to, though, I got to be careful. It's a 4-man panel. And this is the tough part, quite honestly, with doing sometimes a 4-man panel, is that it's a balancing game on everybody getting a voice in and the flow of conversation kind of going smoothly and the debates kind of coming up at the right time and then not going for too long and dominating everything. And it's a bit of a balancing game on that sometimes, versus when I get to just be live right now and just kind of flow and go a bit. Kokam, yeah, likely be the final nail I could see from the Packer perspective. Very possible, man. Very possible. He's going to have a lot on his shoulders this year for them. And this is also a bit of prove a year there. And head coach came back and there was some thought that they might move on from him. And it's going to be it's a very strange time for the Packers too, because you have lost some of that talent. Rashawn Gary and Ryan Clark off that defensive line, two of their most important defensive linemen. I don't think Lucas Van Ness has really come forward for them off the edge. You have Micah Parsons, who was very good for them and was an awesome addition to their defense, but now he's coming off a torn ACL. Some questions there. Packers will have no running game without him. We took their backup. They have no depth. No, they don't. I'd even offer too, Corey. It's a team that needs kind of that star running back, in part because that offensive line isn't as strong as it's been in certain years with the Packers over the last 10 years. That's a line where there's some problems there. There's some holes. There's some, lack of talent, dare I say. Where that's always been a place that in Packers in typical years, they've gotten that right every time. Like the offensive line's always been solid. Kokam says, not sure if this was mentioned previously, but is there any concern of our assistant general manager going to be the general manager for the Vikings? I mean, there is some, in that it definitely hurts your brain trust, and it's a guy who's been here for a very long period of time. You do get compensatory picks back in return for him going because he's a minority hire, so you're not losing him for nothing. 2 more compensatory picks for what's going to be a very strong draft, and then in 2027, or back-to-back 27, 28, you get back-to-back years. But it would definitely sting. He's been a right-hand man of John and a guy that he's been heavily reliant upon. Jordan says, I'm kind of scared the Rams are already talking with the Browns to get Garrett. I'm tremendously scared of it right now. I'm more scared of the Rams talking to the Garrett than I am thinking there's a possibility of the Seahawks landing Garrett. And I don't have anything I'm basing that upon, just a general, maybe I'm a glass half empty guy on this right now, Jordan. But I am kind of seeing it the same way, where I'm just going, I'm really concerned that they're like, you look at their quiet off season, you look at the strange way that they didn't do more past really the McDuffie move. And it just does kind of speak to like, maybe there's something percolating here beyond. And I don't like that. Brian says, Brando, that's exactly what I got through saying to Cocom Popcorn. Love, if his first read ain't there, he can't extend plays or go through progressions. Yeah, well, and that's where it is definitely one where if it's not through his first read, tendency to overthrow or throw it away. Okay, he will do the improvisation thing a little bit. That's where I will give him a little bit of credit to where he'll get to the improvisation and then he can sometimes do that running around and then make the crazy play down the field. It's not like he's Caleb Williams or Russell Wilson, and that he can do it like lean on it as a part of his game, or even a guy like Brock Purdy and how he does it. But it's there a little bit. It's there. But the one read thing is something that I started watching for 3 years ago. And once you start noticing it on Love, when you watch it, start looking for it. And once you start noticing it, you can't unsee it. The head goes to one side of the field. It sits there and stares down the side of the field. And eventually a throw will come out, or it haphazardly gets thrown away, or he tries the improvisation game at that point. There's something like against his religion to have his head go through all of the reads on the field. And it should have come along. Charlie Brando, with these recent negative stories and press about NFL players misbehaving, the pivot to high character guys by John Schneider really shows how good the scouts are at finding quality people and why it's so important, man. It's one that, fans don't like character and stuff. And the guy's so good. Look at the Jalen Carter thing and how much blowback happened there because John avoided that for that very reason. But there's a reason you do it. And you heard about the Eagles this offseason playing and toying with the idea of potentially moving Jalen Carter as they're now having to pay Jordan Phillips the big contract they're paying him. And I think it speaks to a little bit about Philly still having some of those worries with Jalen. Not that he's not a good player, but it's an extra thing you have to deal with when that comes in addition with the player. And it's not a fun extra part to have to deal with. Corey's, I don't think the Rams will make any more moves. I think they have all they need. Might be. Hope you're right. I desperately hope you're right. Still blows my mind how some of these teams look at great quarterbacks like the Bengals and the Bills. So incompetent they can't support their generational quarterbacks. Just mind-blowing to me. Same with Luck. Teams just have a weird process to how they approach the quarterback position, man. It is a strange one, that's for sure. Dig that Brandon does John Schneider trade Emmanuel Wilson back to the Packers for $50 million. Cost you a 3rd round pick. You guys need it. Think that Garrett will take the money and house in Malibu Beach, sadly, before coming to the Hawks, I think. Hope we get him, though. I could see that winning out, man. William, hey, BR, the Seahawks going to make a big trade? Probably not until more trade deadline. Definitely, Corey, the Rams are going to have to start enlisting void years to get these deals done. They've got a lot of contracts that are kind of stacking up that have to be done extension-wise. And the cap space is starting to get pulled down. Or Titan, I think Garrett ends up in Dallas. He's from Texas. JJ gets desperate. Cowboys have picks. They might even throw in Pickens in the deal. Could make it interesting. Browns might have a receiver they're willing to give up too. I think the Browns took a couple of receivers in this last draft, Oiler Titan. So might be something that they're open to kind of pulling here. I like it, man. Interesting scenario. Jerry, I think Jerry's definitely getting desperate. Getting old. Gonna die soon, Toiler. Gonna die. You need to get my championship. You may get credit. Ricky, McDonald, Grubb, Milrow, Wilson, now Price are the only John Schneider moves he is responsible for since Pete has left. Are the only John Schneider moves he's responsible for? I feel like he's made some more moves than that. I feel like he's done some more than that. Brendan Nelson reporting Ian Rappaport saying that we have a new owner in place this offseason. Deal may eclipse $10 billion. You hear anything about this? I haven't heard anything about this prior to the show. So must have just broke as I was going live. I was prepping up for the show today a little bit. But I kind of expected the timeline to be around this territory when they announced the sale was coming down the line in the Super Bowl. This is kind of how it plays out. People were thinking it was going to take a couple of years, but it tends to happen within the 6-month period of the announcement. Cope, I think the Rams might trade wide receiver 3 before the deadline if Mumfield or Jordan Whittingham doesn't take a step forward. Agreed. Definitely in place for them. You look at a guy like Garrett Wilson, Cope, as a guy that they might look to target. Lonzo, remember we drafted one guy as his number 1 pick and he had an accident before the season began and never played. I forgot his name. That would be Mike Macdonald. And that is the guy that took that ATV off his forehead in the offseason right during this period, Lon. That's why I call it the dark period for coaches at this time of year, because you're not in the facilities with these players. They're out on their own. They're doing wild stuff sometimes. They're having fun. They got money. Yeah, got to be careful, man. Protect that body. Don't do nothing crazy. You're a multi-million-dollar athlete. Act like it. Pumpkin saying, what's up, y'all? Chris, it would truly suck if they got Garrett. Stafford's contract means things get interesting, but damn, they need some magic. I mean, they've got an owner worth a ton of money. They've got very little void year money buried down the line. If they want to go to crazy town on that, and if you're right now making a trade for Garrett, why wouldn't you? I mean, it's easy to go to crazy town if you're like, okay, we just extended Stafford and we traded for Myles Garrett. Is that good enough reason for us to bury void years down the line? Yeah, I could kind of wrap my head around that if I'm in a Ram perspective on that. Hope Rams need to take lessons from Howie Roseman. He can make $100 million contracts disappear. Boy, can he ever. Dig to Brandon, JS Spoon, John Schneider Spoon got to have a sit down at Dino's and get the contract deal done. It'll get done. Henderson seems pretty confident by training camp. I feel pretty good about that too. They got to go through the process, but it'll get figured out. You ain't letting him go. Yeah, sorry I don't have more information on it, Fro. It was just maybe kind of breaking as I was going live today. But probably about what we'd expect on this. I would not think that this is one that's going to take a long period of time for the ownership to come forward. Jack, I think McVay would want another wide receiver before Garrett. He loves his tight ends. I would have thought so too, to a degree here, Jack. I think part of what could impact this is that if you're moving a Byron Young as part of the trade, and that can reduce down the trade capital, a bit of this is also that, okay, now we don't have to pay $25 million per year to Byron Young, because that's what he's going to expect to probably be making right now on a new extension. So it is also a little bit of a tit for tat to what you're doing with your other edge there that you're moving in addition to the deal. But you never know. Corey, Brandon, when do you think the Rams will extend Puka? The longer the wait, the more expensive it'll be, in my opinion. Hard to say. The offseason has made this the hard part of it because he's gone to rehab and we don't know what's going on in the background of it. And it could be the Rams have said, look, you've had this crazy offseason and you've been a problem on this and we cannot afford to give you this. We're not going to make you the highest paid receiver in the league when you're going off the hook like this. You need to get this under control. And if you can prove to us that you do so under another year, we'll give you the extension after this year. And maybe Puka's like, okay, bet. I understand that that's what I'm going to have to deal with. Gets hard to predict on this. I would think Puka would push to say, I need to get the deal done now. But like I say, his offseason and his wild ride of an offseason have made this a bit of a tough, predictable spot. Warhammer, is there a Leonard Williams trade available this offseason? Trading for a French player that might be viewed over the hill, but a lot still left to give. A trench player, not a French player. Not really, no. I looked pretty hardly through the available trades that are going to exist out there. And that's why I say on this one, Warhammer, is that it's not a trade thing that's going to probably happen now. It's probably not going to happen before training camp. If there's going to be a deal that's going to be moved by John, a big swing kind of deal that's going to be moved by John, it's probably going to have to happen by the trade deadline. And one of the reasons that I say that is because there's not an available player right now that you can go make that move for. So it's going to need to have one of those teams that thinks they're in it, that thinks they're a contender, that thinks they're going to be in competition to go do things this year that actually ends up falling flat on their face. And now a guy that's not available now by any way, hook or crook, suddenly then becomes potentially available. Charlie B, who gets more bucks, Gonzalez or Witherspoon, same agent? Whoever signs second, Charlie. But they're both going to make the same when it's all said and done. Yeah, Garrett Wilson's nice, man. I think he's an interesting piece to look at on that open market as a guy that can be moved around at some point. Not necessarily to us. Jack, we also have Hall as a similar player to Byron Young. Milroe could also be a trade chip. Kid has high potential. He's the real trump card. I could see the Browns liking him a lot. Lamar 2.0. People were mentioning that a little bit earlier too, because you do have Todd Monken there with the Browns, right? Todd Monken has been the recent offensive coordinator for Lamar Jackson. And so maybe looks at, to your point of that, of being a player that here's a Lamar Jackson-like player that I can utilize and that he's better than what we have here on the roster and these other quarterbacks. Especially for an offense that's going to kind of have to manufacture things, especially for an offense with an offensive line that's going to be a bit of a work in progress. So, yeah, you could definitely have Hall as that equivalent kind of piece that's moved in here a bit, Jack. And that's where this could get, like this division, like this last year, like this probably upcoming year to the end of the season. This Garrett trade comes down to us and the Rams again, neck and neck, both duking it out for who's got the best trade capital to throw, who can overtake the other, who's more motivated and pushed in their motivation to do it because of the fact they know that their nemesis is out there trying to drive for the very same asset. It makes this very interesting. But you're right. There's maybe a creative way you could do this deal to where you can give up maybe a little bit of less draft capital. You got a little bit more to give than the Rams do. I certainly don't think that they have the similar multiple pieces that they could kind of throw into the pot here that would make it worth their while. Then you have a little bit more of the depth to where you could do that. Even guys like a Tyrese Knight who might have a little bit of extra value in a trade like that. Right, Jack? Good point. I'm saying that we have more assets than the Rams. Only question is if John's willing to trade picks. Yeah, agreed. And that's where it comes down. You maybe have the assets, but maybe the Rams are willing to do the 3 first-round picks, but maybe you're only willing to do the 2 first-round picks, but then you'll throw a couple of players, and maybe they're only going to throw 1 player, and, you're onto it, man. It's hard to know for sure because a guy like Garrett's just not really ever been available out there in the market as a baseline here. So the sky might be what it takes, The King's ransom might be the going price. Chris, maybe Hargrave and Buckner could be trade bait by trade deadline or a lesser guy like Slayton from Cincy. Yeah, that's a possibility. I think the Buckner contract's a tough one to move out there in Indianapolis, but it's possible. I don't know if he's as quite as good as he's once been either. He's getting a little bit long in the tooth. I'd avoid Hargrave at this point myself. He's definitely kind of at the Dunsky phase. But it could be a team that's like a team that's really good right now that falls out. A team that everybody thinks is going to be a team like the Broncos, where everybody's like, oh, the Broncos will definitely be good against this year, and then they just kind of have a down year. This happens, right? There's always a couple teams that kind of fall, and then there's players available that you had no idea would become available. Hard to predict on that one, but that is where I do think that you're looking more trade deadline on a time period for John making a trade, in my opinion. Unless the Garrett or Crosby thing does become available right now. Absent that, we're going to have to kind of wait and see on this one. Corey says, even if the Rams do make a splash trade, we'll counter to ours over the hump like we did with Shaheed. Very possible, man. They go Garrett, we go Crosby. Tit for tat. The arms race just keeps on going. It just don't stop. Jack says, yeah, Browns have a lot of quarterbacks, but Milroe would be the franchise guy if they got him. Can't say the same for Simpson. Yeah, true. I mean, the Browns, you've got Shedeur Sanders, who they don't even seem sold on. The kid they took out of Oregon last year, who looked completely lost and maybe not even a functional backup in this league. And then we know at this point with Deshaun Watson, it's just a matter of time. And so you bring in a guy like Milroe and you get these extra first-round picks. If you think about it from the Browns' perspective, we bring in Milroe in, we get all these first-round picks. We got a young building roster. And okay, we get to see what Milroe we got this next year. And if we learn after this year that he's not the guy, we come back into next year's draft and we get our quarterback then. And if he is the guy, then we've got a team built even that faster to get to kindly become legitimate. So like from a Browns perspective, I could see where that could potentially be a tantalizing option for them here. Obviously, will depend a bit upon what they saw in Milroe and their general opinion of him. Chris, I think the Browns would look to draft a quarterback first trading for Milroe, though. I joked about it earlier if they were truly out on their staff. Yeah, that's where I think that's more of the ideal, but that's where too you could look at it from a standpoint, their perspective of let's double up. I mean, if Milroe even serves into becoming kind of a backup for us for a couple of years behind that starter after the season, not the worst case scenario. I don't think Milroe would be a driving force of the value of the trade. It would still be the first round picks. It would still be the potential of a Derek Hall combination with Milroe. It's just that he gets to be that extra kicker that could push you past the finish line by a nose past the Rams, maybe. All this stuff's kind of conjecture. It's kind of hard to say for sure, one way or the other with that. All right. Well, we have passed 3 hours today on the show. I think this is a good time to call it a day as we get to the end of the chat here on this side of it. I really do appreciate you guys again for another great show. Very kind donations all the way throughout here as well from Dogzilla, Nathan Tucker, Corey Coombe, Jeffrey Thistle, Dogzilla, Warhammer Guy, James Morse with a $50 drop. Thank you for that, James. You guys are tremendously kind as ever here on this channel, and it is much appreciated. We've got a little quiet schedule here for the next week or so. We might be coming back here on Sunday with a show. I'm kind of working on ideas for that one. So we will be back here coming up shortly theoretically here on Thursday, Sunday. I'm working on the Kubiak series as well, trying to get that all knocked out at once so that I can kind of release it one after another to you guys on that one. So hard at work on the Kubiak stuff, hoping to have that out to you guys within the next about week and a half or so, but just give me the time on that one. I want to do it right, do it properly, do it well for you guys. So working on that as well. Yeah, that's what we got percolating right now. So we'll be moving into June here, just kind of cooking along through a little bit of the shorter shows probably into June as we go a little bit, theoretically, 1, 2, 3 hours versus the 5, 6, 7 that we do in season. But yeah, on that, we'll be back really soon on this. If you guys get a chance, we got the Hawks Clips channel, full motion running right now. It's all a separate channel here. It's got clips of these live shows. If you can't catch the full live shows, he's been doing a great job over there, my guy, on that side of it, putting out some great work on that end. We got the Roundtable on Tuesday nights, NFC West Roundtable, separate channel as well. Hope you guys are tuning out for that. And then as well, Friday, we got a members and patrons only stream call-in show. So if you're a member, if you're a patron, do be on the lookout if you're on the community post here, if you're a member. So on the community post, I posted the link yesterday to Friday's show. I will repost that again, but do keep an eye out on your community post because that's where I've got to post that out, the link to that show. Friday, 4 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. We're going to be doing a call-in show on that day. So if you want to call in, let's talk about the offseason, moves you'd like to see Seattle make, moves you're mad that you didn't see Seattle make. I'd love to hear from you guys and see what you think about this offseason and how John navigated these waters. I really do thank you guys for a great show again. Just awesome discussion in the chat as ever. You guys bring it every single time I go live, and I really, really appreciate that about you guys. Just some great discussions, some cool things to turn over. We've got the Myles Garrett situation sitting here now as something that's kind of emerging on this horizon line and being a potential real pendulum swinger for this division if one of the teams in this division could happen to land him. So we'll see how this does play out. I think we're going to get some news on this one way or the other very shortly as a confirmation that he is on the move or that he is just going to remain in Cleveland. And it could shift the power balance in a major way if he's moved one or the other. So we will see on that one. I will keep you guys updated if something gets moved on that area of things. I do hope, though, that you guys do remember that you are the champions, that you are coming back off as the representative of the NFC, that you are the team that won it with the third youngest roster in the NFL. Because, I mean, I hear all these national folks filling your ear full of lies, telling you it's everybody else that's the contender. It's everybody else that's at the top of the power ranking. They're not giving you respect. They're not giving you your just due. But you know what? That don't matter because you're going to remember. You're not ever going to forget. You're keeping at the forefront of your mind that this team is just that damn good, and we're going to run it forward. We're going to run it forward, as Mike Macdonald was telling his crew yesterday. So don't ever forget. Don't you dare ever forget. Go Hawks.